across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's great to be in the chair. I'm here today and tomorrow and at the weekend as well between 10 and 1. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to talk about this Thursday evening, and it is largely in regard to the fallout that continues in regard to the Supreme Court's decision yesterday to categorise biological sex as the way to describe what is a woman, very straightforwardly, an adult human female, they say. It's really interesting, quite a number of different organisations reacting to this, including British Transport Police. They're saying that trans women in custody will now be searched by male officers in a change to their policy in light of the Supreme Court ruling. I think there are going to be many, many other organisations that do exactly the same thing because they want to be in compliance with the law. Also, Met Counter-Terrorism Police criticised over an Easter egg hunt, yes really, in working hours. Shouldn't they be catching terrorists? Call me old-fashioned. We'll also talk about Keir Starmer being slammed over that trans decision. Also, Starmer's EU net zero deal apparently to drive up energy bills. We've been told on numerous occasions our energy bills will come down because of net zero. Guess what? That might not be the case. Doctor Who boss hitting back at wokeness criticisms. We'll talk about the sport as well a little bit later on with Uma Gurav, and GPs rewarded with 20 quid a time for keeping people out of hospital. Lots to discuss, including the White House expecting a UK trade deal within 3 weeks. I want your views, of course, on that and everything else we're discussing today, or something you think we should be discussing. What are we missing? Let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute, please, and then we'll play them out. Or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk Drive. Maybe you're off on your Easter holidays already. Maybe you are one of the car dwellers heading home for the Easter holidays. Maybe you're off for the next few days. We'll stick with Talk. We've got a great lineup of shows as usual. I'm going to be here on Monday filling in for Julia Hartley-Brewer, taking a well-deserved day off as well. So for the next 5 days, I'm going to be on your screens and on your radios, and thank you so much for your company. There's one major story. It happened yesterday, but the effects are being felt right across the UK and beyond. People are reacting to this, and this is because the Supreme Court has decreed that a woman is a woman and a man is a man, really, as straightforwardly as that. This is the trans debate and how the Equality Act of 2010 should be interpreted. Now, it's interesting that quite a number of organisations are reacting to this. British Transport Police now is the latest one, saying trans women in custody will be searched by male officers in the change to their policy. This is in light of the Supreme Court ruling. The force says its new interim position would see trans people held in custody searched by an officer in line with their birth sex. A spokesperson said, under previous policy, we had advised that someone with a gender recognition certificate may be searched in accordance with their acquired sex. However, as an interim position, while we digest yesterday's judgment, we have advised our officers that any same-sex searches in custody are to be undertaken in accordance with the biological birth sex of the detainee. We are in the process of reviewing the implications of the ruling and will consider any necessary updates to our policies and practices in line with the law and national guidance. I think the British Transport Police is going to be one of many, many organisations doing exactly the same thing, because they have to be they have to do what the law says. They have to be in line with the law. It's interesting as well that Kemi Badenoch has come out. She's got a story in the Daily Telegraph today. She has said saying trans women are women was never true in fact, and now it isn't true in law either. The era of Keir Starmer telling us women can have penises has come to an end. Well, let's talk about this with Candace Holsworth. Candace is a writer and broadcaster, and Matthew Hulbert is a political commentator. Just before we start the debate, which I'm sure will be a spirited one, I just want to say a big welcome back to Matthew. I know you've had some battles with your health recently, and although we disagree on basically everything, Matthew, I just want to say it's great to have you back on the airwaves.
Cheers. It's really good to be back with you, Peter. To be honest, it's good to be anywhere at the moment because my recent ill health was pretty bad. It got pretty scary there for a while, but I'm here. I'm fighting fit. Well, fitter than I was anyway, so good to be with you.
Delighted to have you back. Now let's get into the disagreement so we can shout at one another. Candace, let's start with you. What do you make of the Supreme Court's ruling? There are a lot of people breathing a sigh of relief here. There are a lot of people saying it's a victory for common sense. What do you think?
Yes, I think it brings clarity in law, and I think that that is really important. So when it comes to certain spaces, for instance, public spaces, where it wasn't clear exactly what people should do, whether they should have a gender recognition certificate or not, the Supreme Court has brought clarity. So now people will know what they need to do when it comes to policing women's spaces, for instance. But I do think, I don't know why we've got to this point where we needed a legal ruling on this. I think, until very recent history, it was just common sense. What was a man? What was a woman? And I think that there were certain activists who pushed the boundaries too far, and now we've had to resort to the law, basically, to reassert what we've all known for centuries.
Matthew, there are people who've lost their jobs because of saying, of stating what the Supreme Court says is biological fact. There are people who have lost their livelihoods as a result of this. Is this a fight that was worth having? Because the way it has ended, or perhaps not ended, but the way it is at the moment, is incredibly straightforward by the look of things. Matthew, are you with us? Oh, he's frozen. We'll get him back on the call anyway. Candace is still with us, and I just wonder, Candace, what you make of some of the criticism of Keir Starmer. We know that there's going to be a clip with Rachel Reeves that we hope to have over the course of this programme at some stage, but it's interesting that Keir Starmer certainly declared in 2022 trans women are women. Then in 2023 he said a woman is an adult female, and in 2024 he drew ridicule for insisting 99.9% of women don't have a penis, meaning 1 in every 1,000 do. What do you make of that remark? And then we'll go to Matthew. Candace.
Yes, I agree. I don't know why he tied himself up in knots like that. He's an intelligent man. He knows that 99.99% of women don't have penises. He knows that 100% of women don't have penises. And I feel like maybe now, as with the Cass review, that there's something authoritative that will come along. Maybe we'll give politicians like him a bit more courage to state biological reality again.
Just before you dropped off the line there, Matthew, I was saying that people have lost their livelihoods, have lost their jobs over saying that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. Was this a fight worth having? Now the Supreme Court has said that essentially, in their mind anyway, biological fact is the way things are.
Well, what I want to say first off here, and I know that you and your guest and probably most of your viewers and listeners will disagree with this, but I'm here to give my point of view, so I'm going to give it. And so I'm here to say that trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary, gender fluid and gender non-conforming people exist, and all of them deserve dignity, equality and respect. So that's what I'd say for a start off, Peter.
I would say, to respond to that I don't want to make anybody's life more difficult. I know that trans people and other people who fall into those categories that you're talking about clearly have not the easiest of lives. They face lots of prejudice, and I wouldn't want anything I said to be in any way making anyone's life worse. I know a lot of people who are members of the LGBTQIA, whatever, however you want to pronounce it, or categorise it, community, who have had all sorts of difficulties over their lives for lots of different reasons. But what the Supreme Court has said is very straightforwardly that trans women aren't women and trans men aren't men. So why are they wrong, do you think, Matthew?
It did say that, and obviously I disagree with them on that, but what the Supreme Court also said, and this hasn't been given anywhere near enough attention in my view, is that trans people are still protected by legislation, still protected by the Equality Act, as it's quite right that they should be. Trans people existed yesterday, trans people exist today, and trans people will exist tomorrow. But what this ruling does mean is that we're going to have the ludicrous situation, ludicrous in my view anyway, of in the NHS, for example, when it comes to hospital wards, and obviously, I've just recently been in hospital myself, we're going to have the situation where trans women, and, without getting too graphic, it can be trans women that have had all the surgery, they are women, are now going to have to be in wards with men. Now,
but they're biologically men, Matthew. The fact is, and as the Supreme Court says, and you may disagree with them, but they're biologically men.
And also, let me add to that. This is the bit that also doesn't get mentioned, is that, you know, trans men never get mentioned. So now we're going to be in a situation where trans men who are men, but who obviously started off
they're biologically
as
women.
females,
They're biologically women.
Are now having, surely, as a result of this legislation, because this is the corollary of what's been decided here, are now going to have to surely be in wards with women, because if we're saying that biology, genitalia, is all that matters, then that is the corollary of that, is it not?
Candace, what would you respond to that? How would you respond to what he says?
Yeah, well, I don't think that you are defined by your genitalia. I think that sex is a chromosomal thing that's defined from conception. And I think that you can make any number of surgical adjustments to your body, but that can't change your sex. That's impossible. There's no human being that's ever changed their sex.
Matthew?
Okay, so, you know, I don't disagree with that, but would your fellow guest there agree that the corollary of what was decided yesterday in terms of things like the NHS is that we will see what I've just talked about there. We'll see
what about,
trans men having to be in wards with women.
But what about, sorry, I'll come to you in a second, Candace, but the point is that you're thinking only about the trans person. What about all the other people who might say, there is someone who is biologically a different sex to me, I don't want them in the same ward as me, I don't want them using the same facilities as me, I don't want them going to the same toilets as me, because they are biologically different. You know, this is not just about trans people, this is about everyone.
But I'd say the problem here isn't trans women. And as you know, Peter, I used to chair in Leicester, here in Leicestershire, an LGBT plus charity. We worked a lot with trans people. I've met a lot of trans people. More often than not, some of the nicest people that you can meet, but who suffer prejudice and discrimination every single day, just because they're being honest to who they are. So just imagine having to live a life like that.
I'm not saying people shouldn't be honest about who they are, and as I said, I don't want to make life more difficult for any trans person who, as you correctly say, do face a lot of prejudice. What I do want to do is to obey the law, and what I do want to do is to deal with biologically where people are. Candace?
Yeah, I think that what we have to think about in terms of this is safeguarding. And I'm sure that most people who identify as trans men or trans women don't do any harm to anyone else. They don't intend to do harm to anyone else. But the essence of safeguarding is you have to guard against the minority who do. And that's why it's very important to preserve all female spaces, for instance. And trans men, so biological women who identify as men, they're protected by that as well, because there are biological differences in strength between men and women. So when they're on a hospital ward with biological men, that makes them more vulnerable.
On the extension of your argument, Matthew, I don't want to put words in your mouth, and you can disagree with me, this characterisation if you want, but Isla Bryson, for example, says they are a woman when they're actually a man, and is a rapist who was originally in a women's prison. I mean, that is an extreme example, but it is nonetheless something that happened. And as Candace says, safeguarding is about the extreme. It's about the small minority of people who do these things. So essentially, go ahead, Matthew.
Of course, Peter, safeguarding is important for all. You know, I wouldn't deny that for a second. And of course, I want to see what I would call cis women, so women who were born as women, have all the safeguards and protections in the world. Of course I do. I'm not about discriminating. I'm not about discriminating one group from another, whereas I think some other people, not necessarily your fellow guest here, but I think other people who I've seen over the past 24 hours be absolutely vile towards and about trans people because they feel emboldened by this result. They clearly do feel like that, and I, you know, I'm
not defending that behaviour, Matthew, but there is absolutely no doubt that this debate brings out really, really strong emotions on both sides of the argument, and I don't think the anti-trans lobby has a monopoly on being horrible or being nasty in any way.
Oh, I agree. But what I'd say, you mentioned the case of the person in Scotland. What I'd say was the issue there was that was not really a trans woman. That was a man who was shamefully using the idea of being trans so that he could attack women.
But what's the difference between someone who is abusing the system and someone who simply says, I identify as a woman. I could say I identify as a woman for any reason, and essentially with a gender recognition certificate, okay, it's a bit more complicated than that, but not much more complicated than that in Scotland, and that's partially what this case was about. You could essentially say, for whatever purpose you wanted, that you are a woman, and you would be in a woman-only space.
But, I mean, what we've got to remember here is that this is a very, very, very small percentage of the population, and yet it takes up so much airtime on this and other networks and newspapers, and yet we're talking about such a small percentage of the population.
But it matters.
Some of the
matters.
most vulnerable people.
Yeah, listen, but it matters, Matthew, and it matters that there is clarity here, and it matters that people have their point across, including yours. Candice, just a final word from you, please.
Yes, I think the reason is, I know it is a very small proportion of the population, but the thing is, it represents such a big change to the status of women in society. I mean, we look at female sports, for instance. I mean, that could be the end of female sports if we stop asserting that sex is binary, and that in most cases, men have a huge physical advantage over women. And this was coming into enormous conflict, and this is why we needed to get it resolved.
Okay, thank you both very much. That's Matthew Hulbert, political commentator. Good to see you back. And Candice, always a pleasure. Candice Holdsworth there, a writer and broadcaster. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Dan. He says, can you please remind Matthew that there's no such thing as a cis woman? It's just a woman. Regards, Dan. Neil says, shouldn't trans just be a third category and not one or the other, male or female? Dawn in Chelmsford says, what the Supreme Court ruling will do is prevent men from taking part in female sport. I mean, that's a whole other element of this, Dawn, and you're absolutely right. Using female changing rooms, using female toilets, it will protect women, and that must surely be a positive outcome. Caroline's been in touch and says a trans woman without surgery to remove their private parts is a threat to vulnerable women on female wards, and that is the whole point of for biological born women. It's also so typical of men to reduce this to an issue, to reduce this issue because it affects women, says Caroline. Brian Bailey says the number of trans people declared is 0.5% of the population. Even if it's treble that, surely we're expending far too much effort in this and have bigger issues and problems to address first. Brian, there's absolutely no doubt that there are very many larger issues than this, but nonetheless this is an issue, and it's an issue because what a woman is has got all the way to the Supreme Court, and those judges have decided that they know what that is, and that is the law of the land, quite literally. Claire has been in touch from the Isle of Wight. Claire, tell us your story.
Yeah, I live in Shanklin on the Isle of Wight, and I'm 66 now, but when I was 32, I underwent gender reassignment surgery, and I remember working in a factory with 300 guys, and I went through hell, but nevertheless, I got through it all. I paid for my own surgery. It didn't cost the NHS anything. But it's about 30-odd years now that I actually underwent gender reassignment surgery. Then the law was changed, and I was legally recognised in law to, as female. And I just go about my life as normal, like anyone else.
So what do you make of this judgment, Claire? You've been living as a woman now for, as you say, 3 decades. So tell me, or over that. So tell me what you make of this judgment.
Well, the trouble is, I remember back then, I think there's only 1% out of every 100 that actually got through the gender identity 2-year, assessment. And even then, you would, if you wanted NHS, you'd have to wait at least another year. Yeah. But I went private after attending Charing Cross Hospital in London, travelling from the island every 6 weeks.
How much did it cost you? How much did the process cost you, Claire?
At the time, it was only 5,500.
I mean, that's still not a small amount of money, especially at that time, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that? What were the motivating factors, Claire?
I think as a child growing up in the 60s, I was bullied a lot because I was very small, because I'm only even 8 stone now, and I found that I had to fight my way through school, and I was being hit by the teachers, I wouldn't tell my dad if I'd been caned because he would give me another whack. And I noticed the girls were never caned, and whether that's got anything to do with it, I have no idea. But I just wanted to live in the female world, and I envied them, and I thought, I wish I was a girl. And so I just went through my life like that, and I found it challenging.
Well, what about now, Claire? I mean, obviously you've talked about the challenges in the past, but do you still face prejudice?
No, because no one takes a blind bit of notice. No one notices any difference, because I still take HRT, which I will do for the rest of my life, actually, otherwise I'll end up with osteoporosis. And
so when you go to a hospital, or when you go to you know, you're out and about and go to the loo, or you know, you're maybe going to a gym or a swimming pool or whatever, which facilities do you go to?
I don't go to gyms or swimming pool. I'm not that confident, to be honest, but I'm too old anyway now for all that. And so, yeah, if I'm in a pub, that I like to have a drink in the Griffin in Godshill, and all the locals know me. They know about my past, and they're lovely. And people don't take any notice. They don't misgender me or anything like that. It's just lovely here on the Isle of Wight. And it's just... I don't know, but this ruling means that all these A, B, C, Q, blah, 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 wherever it is, I knew back then, I thought this is going to do some damage. These people claiming to be one gender one day and another gender the next day, and they have no intentions whatsoever to undergo gender reassignment surgery.
So is your point then, Claire?
They would run a mile away.
Okay, is your point then, Claire, that you should? I don't want to put words in your mouth, Claire, but is your contention that people should see you and call you and think of you as a woman because you've had gender reassignment surgery, and if people haven't had gender reassignment surgery, they shouldn't be thought of as the sex they've transitioned to?
Well, I think if you're genuinely got gender dysphoria, and you genuinely want to go through reassignment surgery, then you will do everything in your power to actually do that. But not to go through that, then you're not genuine in my opinion. And I think so. I was worried because I've lived the last 30 odd years being legally female, and I just feel that how could I change my life now? It would be absolutely, suicidal to me. I don't think I could handle it, to be honest.
Okay.
So I just go about my business quietly, like every other genuine do, and I'm just fed up with all this teaching children about trans issues and all the rest of it. Let them grow up, let them be children, and then they'll learn about anything like this from their later years. But to start messing about with young children, I'm sorry, I don't agree with it, because they need time to understand themselves, let alone being indoctrinated by all this nonsense.
Claire, thanks for your thoughts there. I really appreciate that. That's Claire on the Isle of Wight. Michael says Matthew wants to afford trans people dignity, and I agree entirely, we should, but equally no woman wants to be labelled cis. Women are women, not well handled. Peter says, Michael, listen, you know, we are the home of free speech, and even though I disagree with basically everything Matthew Hulbert says, I said that beforehand, I'm saying it now, you know, he is entitled to his opinion, even if the vast majority of us, including me, think it's wrong. So I'm not going to interrupt someone every single time they say cis woman or cis man. That is not my position. I just think there are women and men. I don't like that phrase. I don't think it's relevant. So, Michael, I think we'll just have to agree to disagree on that. But on my programmes, we do disagree without being disagreeable, and that's okay. Tell me your thoughts on all of this. Tell me your thoughts on what Claire said. 0344 499 1000. In just a second, we're going to talk about Peter Blexley, about counter-terrorism coppers going on an Easter egg hunt. This is not the 1st of April. Stay with us.
what it boils down to is a legalization of illegal migration, because when you take the one who arrived here illegally and you replace him by one that's been sent to us by France legally, that we've effectively legalized illegal migration. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And so nothing could do more than to encourage people from their general movement from Syria, North Africa and elsewhere into Europe than this scheme.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Angie, who's been in touch. She says, one thing that worries me is what is happening to our young people who appear to be indoctrinated into believing that they can change gender with surgery and there are no consequences in the long term. That's Angie Hodson on Twitter there. Angela says, so much fuss, Peter, over so few. Dave has been in touch to say, great show, excellent call from Claire, what common sense. That's Dave in Northampton. And Julia has been in touch to say, I'm absolutely delighted that common sense has won. Biological sex is what defines a woman, full stop. This is going to protect girls and women in the future. And Tracy has been in touch saying the Easter egg hunt story is surely a late April Fool's, when we're going to talk about that right now. And this is that Metropolitan Police counter-terrorism officers have been going on an Easter egg hunt. Yes, really, it's not the 1st of April. Honestly, what on earth is going on here? Peter Blexley is with us, our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective. Peter, I mean, where to start with this one? I mean, presumably they're very good at hunting down the Easter eggs, given their counter-terror kind of crime-solving abilities. But this is 100% not what these people should be doing. They should be catching terrorists.
When I came across this story yesterday, I was absolutely flabbergasted. The reputation of British policing per se is on the floor, and many would say with a lot of justification. To then organise some childish kind of Easter egg hunt, the sort of thing you do for primary school kids in your back garden, but you do it in a Metropolitan Police building which houses counter-terrorism police and other specialisms, is just beyond compare. Haven't they actually got some crime they could be investigating instead?
One would have thought so. And I mean, the Metropolitan Police spokesman said, every day our officers work round the clock to keep London safe and they will always prioritise urgent jobs and core policing work. That may well be true, but there's no denial that this has happened. I'm not saying necessarily that police officers shouldn't enjoy their job to some degree, but their job is to get out there, solve crimes, catch criminals, catch terrorists, and that is not what they're doing if they're trying to find Easter eggs.
And police officers, of course, should have downtime. And in my day, after a long, arduous day at work when I was a detective, we often went to the pub, something which I'm sure is frowned upon these days. But you know what? If our current officers spent a bit more time in pubs and a bit less time hunting Easter eggs, then they might have a greater understanding of the crimes that affect everyday people.
Tell us a little bit about this Empress State building in West London. It houses the main counter-terrorism operations centre. These are elite officers. These are not bobbies on the beat. I'm sure there are some bobbies on the beat listening at the moment, on or off duty. Their eyes cast to the heavens, thinking, what a load of old nonsense here. And we see this, don't we, Peter, from time to time. We see people dancing on pride parades, for example. We see people going on Easter egg hunts. We see people dancing at the Notting Hill Carnival. I mean, just police, just do your job.
Oh, absolutely. But you see, these kind of things are done with the backing and the support of senior police officers. And these days, most senior police officers couldn't catch a cold, let alone a team of organised criminals. Everything is so centralised, everything is on a spreadsheet, because if you can't measure it, then it's of no use to an ambitious superintendent who wants to climb the next rung of that greasy pole. And so it goes. These police officers, senior police officers, have all got their university degrees, They're masters. Some of them have got doctorates and MBAs and more letters after their names than in front of them, are absolutely indoctrinated with this kind of mind think, which is so totally detached and divorced from the concerns of the front line, and not only the front line, but the people they serve. You, me, your listeners, your viewers, and all those people who today, while police officers were thinking of going on an Easter egg hunt, have become victims of crime.
Peter, can I ask you about another story that's around today? This is in reaction to what the Supreme Court did yesterday, and this is the British Transport Police saying trans women in custody will be searched by male officers. They said this is their interim position, which would see trans people held in custody searched by an officer in line with their birth sex. They're reviewing their policy, as I think many parts of the state and parts of the apparatus and businesses will be doing as well, in reaction to the Supreme Court ruling. What's your reaction, Peter?
British Transport Police have been amongst the most ludicrous of British police services in recent times, and believe you me, that is saying something. They actually granted permission for trans officers to strip search, intimately search women. What an absolute scandal that was. I railed against it at the time, as did many others. Fortunately, the Supreme Court has put a brake on that, and rightfully so. It was absolutely disgraceful, and if you listen carefully enough, you can hear the shredders at British Transport Police as they have to get rid of so much of their woke and nonsense policies.
Peter, thank you. That's Peter Blexley there, former Metropolitan Police detective, and thank you to Dave, who's been in touch and said, Peter Blexley for Prime Minister. Lots of people getting in touch about the Supreme Court ruling as well. Mark in Somerset on Claire's call there, just before we talk to Peter. Claire from the Isle of Wight put it across so very well, so very clearly, even I can understand it, says Mark in Somerset. Great conversation. Amanda says, we can only hope that the sensible Supreme Court ruling yesterday is the first step towards ridding this country of so much woke madness. Susan says, great call from Claire on the Isle of Wight, a voice of reason, an example of how to live your life without insisting women give up their rights to accommodate you. Hit the nail on the head when she said the whole vociferous trans rights movement was going to cause trouble. It has. Full blame on Stonewall and weak, pathetic politicians who were bullied into utter daftness, says Susan. If all trans people were like Claire, there would never have been any problems. Cheers, Claire, says Susan. And Susan, I agree with you, and I think that there are so many trans people who just want to get on with their life, who just don't want to face prejudice, who just want to live their life the way they want to live it. And I have no problem with that necessarily. What I do have a problem with is people saying, and activists and people who should know better, saying that men aren't men and women aren't women and trans women are women and trans men are men, to which the answer is always the same. If you're saying a trans woman is a woman, why do you have to say that if they're just a woman anyway? If a trans man is a man, why do you have to say that? Because it would be fact, but the point is it isn't fact. It isn't fact. It isn't biological fact. One more from Frank Etchells in Bingley in West Yorkshire. He says, I agree with your caller Claire. I appeared in a well-known soap opera with an actor who has transitioned surgically from female to male and plays that very character. So there is no way you could see him as anything other than a man. He's a lovely person, and the idea that he would now have to change because of this ruling upsets me. I mean, he doesn't, Frank. That's the point is there's no one saying to trans people who have transitioned that you've got to do anything other than it's about recognition in law. Frank says, I'm a 70-year-old dinosaur, but there needs to be some consideration for fully transitioned people. Frank, there is, and they're still protected under law. They're still protected from discrimination. They're protected from being treated badly. That is the case. There's no doubt about that. And please don't worry about your friend, because there's no way that the law is going to discriminate against them. What the law is going to do, as the Supreme Court says, is recognise biological sex, and that's something slightly different. There's lots more to talk about on this. I know there's quite a few people who want to get in on the phones as well. We'll take some calls very shortly. 0344 499 1000 if you want to do that. But in a second, we're going to talk about Keir Starmer and his EU net zero deal, which apparently, according to some, could drive up energy bills. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. David in the Cotswolds says, with regards to the Met Easter egg hunt, what happened? Did any of them turn up, or did they just issue the Easter bunny with a crime reference number? Says David. David, that's brilliant. It's only 4:39, but I think that may well win message of the day. We'll see. There's still plenty of time to get your messages in. You can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222, or you can send me a WhatsApp message, just as David did actually, on that main number 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about Keir Starmer. He is set to join a European Union net zero scheme as soon as next month, in a move that risks driving up energy bills. Now, this is part of a reset with Brussels, strengthening ties with Europe. Why do we have to do that? There's a thing called Brexit. A government spokesman says that we are resetting our relationship with the EU to improve trade and investment and promote climate, energy and economic security. Ahead of the UK-EU summit on the 19th of May, the government is actively considering the case for linking the UK ETS to the EU ETS, but it will be important that any prospective agreement works for the UK. This is emissions trading schemes. Harry Wilkinson is head of policy at Net Zero Watch. Harry, what's going on here and why do we need to be concerned?
Well, what we should be concerned about here is that ETS costs are actually really important for setting electricity prices, because the marginal generator in the UK is often gas power stations, because gas power stations can be ramped up and down according to demand. And renewables can't do that. When the wind isn't blowing, when the sun isn't shining, you simply can't rely on it. So the marginal generator sets the price for the rest of the electricity market. So when you add a tax onto that, which is what ETS is, you push the price up of all electricity generation, even those renewables as well. They mean that we're paying more to those generators, and of course the consumer loses out because they end up paying more. Now, when we left the EU, we got off the old EU ETS scheme and we created our own UK version, which was initially actually more expensive than the EU's version, but those were adjusted under the last government. And since then, we've actually been having lower carbon costs than we've been seeing in Europe. And that's kept our electricity prices lower than they would have been otherwise. Now, I would say we should just scrap that completely, because, why are we adding to electricity prices at a time when many of our industries are on their knees, when people's energy bills are far higher than they need to be? But to think of replacing this scheme with one that's been trading much higher, the EU ETS scheme, just shows a government that completely has no care about the damage that high electricity prices are doing, and seems to be wanting to move closer to the EU on top of that.
We were told, of course, that our energy bills would come down because of Labour's policies. We were told that net zero and the moves towards net zero would really help. But actually, we have Nick Timothy, a Conservative MP, saying that linking these schemes to the EU would cost British households an extra £112 a year in more expensive goods and electricity from gas-fired plants. There are all sorts of calculations going around at the moment. What doesn't seem to be a calculation is that energy bills will come down necessarily. In fact, they've gone up, as has the price of so many other household bills. A lot of that is the march towards net zero. Do you think there is any form or chance of a rethink on this? I mean, you're a net zero watch, you're clearly against it, but do you sense that the lobbying, the greater awareness of what net zero actually is, and I think it would be catastrophic for our economy, and I'm someone who believes in man-made climate change. A lot of our viewers and listeners don't. Do you think any sort of rethink is happening here?
I think a rethink is happening. There is this tension in the government at the moment between perhaps Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, who want to go ahead with projects like Heathrow, which would be carbon-intensive projects, and Ed Miliband, who is perhaps the most keen advocate of net zero. It's obviously his department, and he's been pushing to go further and faster. I'm glad you mentioned about electricity costs. We were supposed to be getting £300 off our bills, but there's been so much misinformation about renewables bringing bills down, when actually, when you look at the wider system costs, the fact that you have to balance that renewable supply with backup fossil fuel generation. You have to build a lot more infrastructure in terms of grid connections. You have to pay constraint payments to actually switch wind turbines off when there's too much wind, and there could be too much summer this summer, apparently too much sun this summer as well. And so we'll have to pay those solar panels to turn off as well. You know, the costs keep mounting up when it comes to net zero. So this strategy that Ed Miliband is on is clearly a road to much higher bills. But I think there are voices now from across the political spectrum who are saying we need to get off this net zero straitjacket. You've got the Conservatives actually saying, you know, net zero isn't something they no longer support. Reform came out with a very anti-net zero platform as well. So the mood music is changing. It's taken a long time to get to this point.
Do you think that's been in any way changed by the discussion over Scunthorpe as well? I mean, a blast furnace is one of the least sort of environmentally friendly things you can think of, yet virgin steel is so incredibly important to this country. That debate has been won, keeping those two blast furnaces moving and fired up and continuing to get all the fossil fuels to them to burn to create the steel that we need. Do you think that in any way has shifted the dial even a tiny bit?
Well, I think it might have. I mean, you've had all these Labour MPs, Conservative MPs, and MPs from all parties marching through the lobby on a Saturday to actually save what is critical infrastructure. The ability to produce virgin steel is essential for warships, railways, and many construction sector uses as well. So if we lose the ability to do this, we're clearly at a strategic disadvantage. So I think many MPs will have had those considerations front and centre when they were going to Parliament last Saturday. But the reality of our net zero legislation means we will no longer be able to do these activities. Now, as you said, blast furnaces are inherently very, very carbon intensive. But net zero means that we have to decarbonise the entire economy. So that can't continue. And a whole range of other activities are going to be banned because of net zero. So, you know, we do have to repeal this legislation unless we want all these kind of industries to close down.
Harry, thanks for your thoughts there. Harry Wilkinson, Head of Policy at Net Zero Watch. What do you think? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Send me a voice note on that same number or a WhatsApp text message. You can text me as well at 7222 the word talk in your text, or tweet me at talkTV. I'll look at my tweets certainly during the break as well. And I just want to say hello to Olivia, who has been in touch. She's listening from East London and is the first time that she has tuned in to the home of common sense. So Olivia, you're very welcome to the station, whether you're old or new, older or younger, or whatever your background is. You're always welcome to listen to and watch this station. And remember, if you're listening, maybe you're off on your Easter holidays and you think, hold on a second, what do these people look like? You can watch us on YouTube or your connected device. Something like 3/4 of homes now have a what's it called? A smart TV. Smart TV. That's sorry, I'm sounding about 3,000 years old here. A smart TV. I have a smart TV at home, and it's dead easy to get talk on that as well. We'll take some calls after the break. Lots of people who want to get in on the trans issue. You can join that discussion. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
people were relieved that Bercow had gone.
Agreed.
Do you remember how awful and
God, yeah.
impartial Bercow was over the whole Brexit debate? And we got a man who, at least in the House of Commons, generally speaking, does his job well. And now he's ruining that reputation. And this is a man who's a socialist. He comes from a socialist tradition. There's nothing wrong with that. But you would have thought that's the last person on earth who would waste taxpayers' money on jaunts to Malaysia. As you say, just stop oil.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Alan's been in touch with a voice note. This is what Alan thinks on the gender ruling.
I've heard a few people saying that this is a trans debate based on only a small percentage of the population, but what they are forgetting with this 0.5% figure being trans is that everyone else is expected to use pronouns. Everyone else has got to go through this nonsense training at work. Everyone else is treading on eggshells, not because they don't want to offend anyone, because if they do offend someone, they'll get in trouble. So it doesn't just affect 0.5% of the population who can't decide whether they're a man or a woman this week. It impacts loads of people.
That's a really good set of points, and that's a really good voice note, Alan, and I think it affects every single one of us, actually, because everybody's talking about this, everybody's having the debate, and yes, there are, as you say, only 0.5% of people who are trans or identify as trans, but, you know, tell me the person who hasn't been told, oh, don't misgender someone, or you got to remember their pronouns, or it's they, them, or whatever. And as I say, I don't want to offend anybody, I don't want to make anyone's life more difficult, but the point is, biological sex is biological sex, and as far as I'm concerned, that's it. John is in West Lothian and has given me a ring about this, so 344 499 1000. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hiya.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the Scottish Government is the exact opposite of what the court has just ruled. They've been issuing instructions to the local authorities.
Yeah, well, that's why this was challenged, John, and it's you know, it wasn't the only element of why Nicola Sturgeon her political career ended, but it was a major part of it.
Yeah, but there's also people threatened to lose their jobs because of it.
Yeah.
And you've got a health service now that's spending a lot of time with all sorts of paperwork, asking all sorts of stupid questions where they should be actually dealing with real people. Mm-hmm. And we've also got the education system in Scotland where the authorities have been told that they've got to allow unisex toilets in high schools and things like that. I mean, it's completely the wrong...
There are children who make themselves ill by not going to the toilet when they should go to the toilet because they don't want to use unisex toilets.
Yeah, I mean, there is one of our local councillors who did raise this issue at a council meeting and put a motion forward for the council to protect women and girls' spaces. And it was voted down by the SNP, Labour and everybody else. Right. And all that she was trying to do was actually protect people and, that genuinely could be in serious trouble. And Angela deserves a lot of credit for that because, honestly, the abuse that she got because of it.
And there are a lot of people who have stood up for what I believe to be common sense, to what I believe to be a really straightforward thing, who have been told essentially that they're wrong when actually we're dealing with biological sex here. And a lot of people have felt, I think, I include myself in this, have felt a bit gaslit by this, by people saying, well, no, black is white and white is black, and if you don't accept that, you're prejudiced and wrong and horrible and a nasty person. And that's just not the case. I don't think there are that many people who really want to make trans people's lives difficult and are horrible and don't like trans people simply because they're trans. That's just prejudice. And I don't think I'm one of those people. I don't think you're one of those people, John. And I don't think the Supreme Court are full of those people either. Absolutely not. And I think people should be allowed to live their lives as they want. But the minority should not be able to dictate to the
majority about what. And I think you mentioned it a wee bit earlier about what pronouns they use and all the rest of it. And if you use the wrong one, you're reported for it. You know, you could be in trouble because of it. It's an absolute nonsense. And unfortunately, the Scottish Government has gone along with this for so long. Yeah, well, now the Supreme Court has spoken a lot of sense, John, as have you today. So thank you for your call. I appreciate it. If anyone asks me my pronouns, I always say they are each, many. You know, they say him, her, or he, him, or whatever. Mine are each, many. Don't misgender me. Dave is in London and has given me a ring. Dave, what do you make of this?
That's a great show as always. I've been kind of following this debate about the last 5 years, and I think congratulations really to people like Helen Joyce, who I think made a massive difference to it. But I was listening to your contributor, I think it was Matthew, is it?
Yeah, Matthew Holbert, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to the term trans women are women because he went after that. But let me just, one other thing, when you said to him, well, what about the guy in Scotland? He said, well, that was so obvious that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. So what Matthew seems to be advocating is Matthew's law, i.e. he will decide when he's got friends.
And what's obvious and what's obvious and what's not obvious, Dave. No, I thought about that point a bit afterwards, actually, and you can say, well, this is obviously someone who is a rapist trying to get into a women's prison. It's like, well, yes, it was, and that was rightly dealt with, but you had the First Minister of Scotland who was defending that.
Yeah, and also, you know, from the, in theory, the law hasn't been changed yesterday. It's just been confirmed. But in theory, what Matthew's advocating there is that, you know, that there are some good and some bad, and he should decide. But the reality is, for what he wants, that guy who wanted to go into the prison would have every right to go into the prison. He'd just say, I've got a piece of paper, I'm a woman, and that's where I'm going.
And the point is, and you've made a really good point there, Dave, and that the safeguards are actually for the minorities. The safeguard is for that Isla Bryson case. It is to prevent exactly that happening, because like most trans people are not going to go into are not going to go into prison to rape people. That's not what they're going to be doing. They want to live their life peacefully and get on with it and not cause any trouble and just get on like the majority of us. But the fact is, laws, burglary laws don't exist for you and me, Dave, because we're not going out stealing things from people's homes, but we're protected by those laws at the same time, and that is, I think, what the law around this has to do as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what I briefly want to talk about is your commentator also quickly went back to the trans women are women phrase, and that's what people that are unhappy with this are going to keep trying to hang on to it. I'd never understand why. If you want to make an argument for a trans woman to go into a women's space, why don't you just make the argument without having to go trans women are women, which therefore gives them the pass to go into the space? Because if I can get you to agree they're a woman, then you have no choice. They now have access to the club. I don't see why they can't say, look, I want to make a case for trans women to be in the women's ward in the hospital. Then make your case in that way, but don't try and wangle it in by saying, well, I don't need to make a case because I've made the statement trans women are women, and therefore they have the access all areas pass purely on the back of that silly phrase.
And I would actually argue to support your point there, Dave, which I think is a very strong one, that if you have to say trans women are women, well then you're almost losing the argument before you've started, because you either think you're women or they don't, and if they're women, well, it should be obvious and straightforward, but the fact is, biologically, they are not.
And the phrase would be redundant, right? To say trans women are women, then you don't need the word trans at the front of it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So it's. But no, I feel I've just been watching Helen Joyce doing some of the rounds, and I feel in particular she really made a massive difference for this.
A victory for common sense, Dave?
Sorry?
A victory for common sense?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I'm really into sport, so for me that's the big one, but also just about all the others as well.
There's going to be a lot of change coming up, Dave. I think, this British Transport Police talking today, we've had different organisations reacting to this. The fact is they have to follow the law, and the law has been interpreted by the Supreme Court. I don't always agree with it, but I nonetheless respect the rule of law. I'm a big rule of law man, and Dave, thank you for your thoughts. That was Dave in London. If you want to join him on the air, 0344 499 1000. The Director of the Academy of Ideas, former Brexit Party MEP Claire Fox, Baroness Fox, will be with us very shortly, as will Mark Littlewood, who's going to talk to us about Doctor Who hitting back at wokeness criticism. Stay with us.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell here today and tomorrow. Whenever you're one of the car dwellers heading home, Easter is coming up. It's Easter Thursday, of course. Good Friday coming up tomorrow, and then on Sunday we all eat our Easter eggs and celebrate the rising of the Messiah as well, if you're a Christian. Lots to celebrate, lots to talk about as well. Today, certainly a historic victory for women and common sense, but what is the Labour Party actually going to do about this? What is the government going to do? Well, we can see that the British Transport Police, they're updating strip search policies after that landmark trans Supreme Court decision yesterday. Loads of people want to talk about it. If you're one of them, give me a ring. We're going to talk to Claire Fox, Baroness Fox, in just a second. Doctor Who, the boss of Doctor Who, has hit back after it's been criticised as woke. If you don't think Doctor Who is woke, well, I haven't seen many episodes of Doctor Who, but it really is pretty woke. We've got someone who thinks it's woke, who's also a massive Doctor Who fan. That's Mark Littlewood, the director of Popular Conservatism. We're also going to hear from you this hour and have a sports update from Uma Gurav a little bit later on, because Arsenal are set for the Paris Saint-Germain semi-final after beating Real Madrid. I'm just back from Paris, actually. Had a few lovely days there. Let me know your thoughts on everything that is being discussed today. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message. Less than a minute, please, if you would. And you can, of course, give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss here on Talk Drive. Stay with us between now and 7. Well, it happened yesterday, but the fallout is being felt today and will be felt for many, many days to come. This is the Supreme Court decision yesterday, to be very, very clear about biological sex, what it is, and what the Equality Act actually says and how it should be interpreted. This is the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. I'm sure there will be further appeals probably to the European Court of Human Rights, but for the moment we are in a position where it's totally clear men are men, women are women, and people have been reacting to that. Organisations have been reacting to that, including the British Transport Police, which has said trans women in custody will be searched by male officers in a change to their policy in light of this ruling. It says this new interim position, they're getting to grips with all of this, are waiting to hear what the guidance from the government is. The interim position would see trans people held in custody, searched by an officer in line with their birth sex. Well, Claire Fox is with us, Baroness Fox. She's director of the Academy of Ideas, former Brexit Party MEP. Claire, what do you make of this ruling?
Well, like very many people, I'm delighted. I'm also relieved, because sometimes during the last few years, I felt as though I was going mad because you could not have a conversation. I remember in the Victims and Prisoners Bill, now an act, the Conservatives were in power. We had the opposition benches, and I was arguing in defence of single-sex spaces. And everybody kept saying, we can have single-sex spaces. And I said, no. But the problem is that they are at the moment being used by people who are self-identifying as women, but not women. And then they'd say, culture wars, it's ridiculous, stop stirring up a hornet's nest. We defend single-sex spaces. And so I was just having those arguments all the time. Many people who were involved in different workplaces were actually not able to enforce single-sex spaces because of this confusion. So what happened yesterday, and it's ridiculous that we have to rely on the Supreme Court to do it, was a clarification of biological reality, factual reality, and legal reality. And now, at last, we're in a situation where we are no longer under pressure to say that trans women are women, and that actually this is somebody who wants to identify as anything they want, can get on with their lives, they have rights, but they can't use that to interfere in what were women's special spaces.
So
I'm delighted, what a relief.
The relevant legislation, certainly in regard to equality, has been around since 2010. Why do you think it's taken 15 years to get to this position? We've essentially been asking for a decade and a half, what is a woman? people like you and I have been saying, well, we know what a woman is. It's an adult adult human female. It's really, really straightforward. There've been quite a few people saying, actually, you're wrong. And I know what you mean about thinking you're going mad and feeling a bit gaslit about this as well, in the sense that I don't think, I don't see you and many, many other people who make the arguments you make, Claire, as, some awful transphobe who hates trans people or thinks they're dreadful people or bad people simply because of how they live their life and the challenges they have faced. I don't think that for a second. What I do think is that you and many other people want to put forward a pretty straightforward argument that actually you kind of wish you didn't have to put forward, but you're feeling as if you have to, because of this very strange thing that we have been told for such a long time that is against biological reality.
One thing that I think we have to be clear about is that a lot of these ideas were a top-down imposition. Politicians of all political parties felt somehow they were kind of leaning in on progressive ideas by not clarifying that there was no relationship whatsoever between, for example, trans right and lesbian and gay rights. They were so worried that somebody might think if you were a Tory, they thought everyone might think it was another Section 28. HR departments in major institutions reorganised themselves around trans inclusion policies. A lot of this comes from, in fact, the equality, diversity and inclusion industry in many ways, which is now dominant in so many organisations, which means that what you had is ordinary working people, or ordinary mums in the case of 4 Women Scotland, 3 women who met on Mumsnet. They weren't radical, they didn't consider themselves political, but they just were fed up of this. And then, so we've got the clash of a kind of grassroots movement that's just grown and grown and grown, as more and more women in particular, but not exclusively, have become concerned about the erosion of some fairly basic women's liberation gains. I mean, who thought that you'd have to say that a women's football team should only have women in it? I mean, it's beyond ridiculous that we got to this point. But the politicians became absolutely resistant to any conversation on this, because they were so frightened. The cancel culture vibe then started to affect them, so they just didn't want to offend anyone, and they let women get thrown under the bus who were activists on this. And that's a real shame.
Well, it's interesting with Keir Starmer and his evolving position. In 2022, he said trans women are women. In 2023, he tweaked his position to say a woman is an adult female. And then last year, he drew ridicule for insisting 99.9% of women don't have a penis, meaning 1 in every 1,000 do. It's interesting as well, part of my job is to go to different party political conferences, and I went to Labour in Liverpool in 2023, and there were unisex toilets at the venue. Exactly the same venue the next year had exactly the same toilets, but they weren't unisex, and actually what they'd done was they'd covered up the urinals. And there were so many people, mainly women, but some men as well, when they were unisex, who just did not feel comfortable in that environment and did not want that to be the case. So even in how the toilets were at their conference, I think Labour's position has evolved in this. We haven't heard very much from the Prime Minister. I know Rachel Reeves has done an interview this afternoon, and maybe we'll hear from her. But what do you think the Prime Minister needs to do now, Claire?
Well, I'll tell you what they don't need to do is what Bridget Phillipson did earlier today, which was to behave as though nothing has changed and they've always agreed that there should be single-sex facilities. Because she's making out that, we've made it all up. What a fuss about nothing. Well, if there was a fuss about nothing, why do we think that we had to take a case to the Supreme Court? And that's another kind of gaslighting, isn't it? Which is to sort of deny that you were ever implicated in this issue. But in fact, a kind of identitarian strain of thinking has really made sure that the Labour Party have been less than clear. So I, myself, think that what Keir Starmer could do graciously is to say, we got this wrong in the past. We're now very clear. Usually the Labour Party are the ones who are constantly bowing down. I always I feel uncomfortable with this, with anything the Supreme Court says, because there's a legalistic mentality. And so we are now going to ensure that every public institution and organisation adheres to this ruling and understands it. I think that the government ministers that I've heard speak on this have been slightly befuddled and confused, either denying there was ever an issue, or saying, well, we will look at how this will apply in certain circumstances. I mean, there's no certain circumstances at all. It is very clear that the law is now not being changed, but tells us that biological sex is what counts when it comes to single-sex provision.
Claire, I wonder what you make of what British Transport Police have done. They seem to be reacting to this. They seem to actually have taken action already. They have said that trans women who are in the custody of British Transport Police, will be searched by male officers in a change to their policy in light of this ruling. They said their interim position would see trans people held in custody searched by an officer in line with their birth sex. A spokesman said under a previous policy we had advised that someone with a gender recognition certificate may be searched in accordance with their acquired sex. However, as an interim position, while we digest yesterday's judgment, we have advised our officers that any same-sex searches in custody are to be undertaken in accordance with the biological birth sex of the detainee. We are in the process of reviewing the implications of the ruling and will consider any necessary updates to our policies and practices in line with the law and national guidance. I wonder what you think of that change. I think it's probably the first of many.
Yeah, I do, and I actually quite admire them for it. I've got a particular interest in this because I asked a question about what effectively could have been seen as, you know, the state's involved in some kind of sexual assault when it wasn't clear. I mean, you could basically have a biological man searching intimately a woman suspect, and I raised it in the House of Lords, and I can tell you now that the Labour minister blew a gasket and effectively accused me of transphobia and said it was inappropriate for me to ask it, even though it was on a question about police practices.
It was inappropriate. So I love this stuff when people say it's inappropriate for you to ask a question because I disagree with what you're saying. You were in the mother of parliaments, Claire, the mother of parliaments, and you were told even asking the question was inappropriate. I mean, they can say I disagree with you, I think this is wrong, but even I cannot stand it when people say that's an inappropriate question.
And then what they do is they refuse to engage, Peter, so you don't get the answer to the question. It's a way of saying, you know, it's like hand in front of face, like some teenager, don't talk to me, you know, go away. And I found it, I mean, it wasn't just disrespectful, but the reason I'm saying that is because there have been so many mad things that have happened based on the lack of clarity over this issue, and that has to have been one of them. And I do also think, by the way, that sports bodies should emulate this approach. Everybody, I see that Refuge, can you imagine this? The original campaigning and charitable organisation that provides women's only refuge for victims of domestic abuse have condemned the Supreme Court, as indeed have Mind, another charity. So what I'd like to see is, rather than them doubling down, these organisations need to stop, breathe, read the judgment, think, look at their policies, and recognise that, by the way, what happened yesterday is not an attack on trans people's rights.
And you can absolutely...
Anyone who identifies as trans, they can carry on. They've got exactly the same rights as the rest of us in society. What they haven't got is an extra right. But they, in a way, have been sold a pop, because a lot of these kind of well-meaning, do-gooding HR departments have told them, mistakenly, misled them into believing they also had the right to claim women's rights.
I think there are also going to be quite a number of organisations that, like the British Transport Police, change their mind on things, change their policy. But it's very interesting you mentioned those organisations that have hit out against the Supreme Court. You can guarantee that had the decision gone in the opposite direction, they would have said, oh, rule of law, Supreme Court says it, you've got to follow this and all the rest of it. There is a stench of hypocrisy in many people's reactions to this as well. Oh, bring it to the Supreme Court, that'll sort it all out. And I just think, and I wonder what you think about this, Claire, that actually the debate about the European Convention on Human Rights is going to be raised again, because I think it's a matter of time before this is brought to the ECHR.
I think it will lead there, because some people are so desperate to kind of wiggle out of this one, as it were, that they will turn to now the only court they've got left, as it were, the EHRC. But you're so right about the rule of law point, because I'm actually not necessarily keen on a judicial way of doing politics. You know, I'd really rather these things were sorted democratically. I don't like the idea that the judges have the final say on democratic.
Although some might argue there's not a huge amount of democracy in the House of Lords, Claire, but that's perhaps an argument for another day.
I assure you, they'd be absolutely damn right on that one. I was more talking about the Commons than I was about the House of Lords. But what I mean by that is that it's not that I want to use the Supreme Court even as a crutch, or as a weapon against people. The reason why it got that far, though, was because the politicians refused to clarify the situation. They could have put out guidance on this at any time. They could have organised debates on it. But instead, what's happened is, because of a kind of mood around cancel culture, that basically anyone, look at the lives that have been trashed by this. And I mean trashed. Reputations ruined, people have lost
their jobs,
been demoted, fell out with their family because they've been called transphobic bigots. Really distressing long-term attacks on them and their motivations and so on. We know that. And so I think the cowardice of the political class has led us into this situation where now we can say, well, the law is now clear. And even I'm going to say it. And it's so funny because I know in the House of Lords, just as an aside, exactly who normally turn around and tut to me and tell me, rule of law, Baroness Fox, Supreme Court, Baroness Fox, how dare you challenge it, Baroness Fox? They will be spitting feathers and they will be running to the European Court of Human Rights. And as you say, that will then lead to, I think, a lot more people realising that that's an anti-democratic way of dealing with issues.
Well, we'll see what happens. Claire, just if they do that to you, there's a wonderful Northern Irish phrase which I would really like more English people to use, which is slap it up you. So if you could use that, I would be very grateful.
If I can get away with saying that in the House of Lords, they already think I'm a rather maverick type. Slap it up you might be a step too far.
Because previously they didn't think of you as a maverick at all, Claire. Thank you very much, Baroness Fox, Claire Fox, there, Director of the Academy of Ideas, former Brexit Party MEP and general legend. Kenny in Edinburgh says, hi Cardi P, the people of Britain owe the Supreme Court a wee pint because finally common sense has prevailed and the Supreme Court has made it official. I want to thank also Sarah in Yorkshire who says, I'm a post-operative trans woman and have been for 3 years now. I'm 66 years old and with this ruling I would feel extremely uncomfortable with male officers strip searching me as I have breasts and a vagina. Sarah, thank you for your thoughts on that. I'd love to talk to you at some time. I know you've been in touch with us and unfortunately you can't speak to us on this programme, but if you want to give me another ring tomorrow I will very happily chat to you about that. And thank you to Rachel who says, how on earth did this gender issue ever get to court? In years to come society will look back on this and think we were all insane. Let's speak to Sharon in Suffolk. Sharon, what do you make of this?
Well, I totally support the Supreme Court ruling, but you just touched on what my question was going to be, in the fact that if somebody has gone through the whole transformation, the whole nip and tuck, so to speak, where do they stand now? Do they have to go into male-only wards, male-only prisons?
I mean, I think so. I mean, that's the outworking of this. They don't have any fewer rights than they did previously, and in fact, it's quite a long judgment, of course, and they are protected under the law. They're protected under equality, certainly. But what doesn't have to happen is provision, and you don't have to believe someone who says, "I'm a trans woman, therefore I'm a woman." You can say, "Well, actually, you're a man because biologically you're a man."
I get that, but if somebody's actually got through and had vagina made,
you're still biologically the same sex you were born, though, and actually.
But if you put somebody like that in a male prison, they're not going to survive.
Would you be happy with them in a women's prison?
If they'd had the whole nip and tuck, yes.
Okay. I think
the ones who self-identify, I don't agree with.
I think a lot of these questions are going to be worked out over the next little while, and we see organisations already working through it. And Sharon, thanks for your thoughts on that. We'll talk more about this as the show goes on, and if you want to join Sharon on the air, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. In just a second we're going to talk about Doctor Who, because the boss of Doctor Who has hit back after wokeness criticisms. Someone who's anti-woke and a Doctor Who expert is Mark Littlewood, the Director of Popular Conservatism. He's going to come on in just a second.
We've gone to those talks with a number of ways that this dispute can be resolved. Unfortunately, the council turned up with nothing.
Is there an offer for another meeting?
Well, the council have said that they'll meet us on Wednesday of next week. Our position...
Next week?
There you go. Exactly, Mike. Which is why my position is that we are ready to meet, and for those of us who are old enough to remember the Martini advert, anytime, any place, anywhere.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, if you're a fan of Doctor Who on the BBC, you may have noticed that it's gone a bit woke in recent years. Now, the show, of course, sci-fi show, returned last week, and Peter Cardwell reprised his role as the Doctor alongside newcomer Verada Sethi as the latest companion, marking the first time the TARDIS team has been composed of both non-white actors. Davies told BBC Radio 2, "Someone always brings up matters of diversity, and there are online warriors accusing us of diversity and wokeness and involving messages and issues, and I have no time for this. I don't have a second to bear it, because what you might call diversity, I just call an open door." And Setu, who made her debut last week, and Belinda Chandra has also addressed claims around the show's perceived wokeness, suggesting that it was meant to be on the right track. There's been a couple of Dr. Woke comments, she told Radio Times, but I just think we're doing the right thing if we're getting comments like that. This is the publicly funded broadcaster and one of its biggest shows. Well, a huge fan of Doctor Who and no fan of wokeness is Mark Littlewood, who is Director of Popular Conservatism. Mark, I understand you've got copies, I think, of every single Doctor Who episode and film ever, perhaps?
I think you can probably just see this, Peter, over my left shoulder here. This shelf here is every existing minute of Doctor Who on DVD. It's taken me 20 years and a small fortune to accumulate that. That entire shelf just over my shoulder, that's all of the vintage Doctor Who that the BBC has ever pumped out and that still exists in the archive. So it's fair to describe me as a fan, possibly even a full-on nerd.
Did you think the shelf was going to be that full, or did you think it sort of seemed smaller and then actually when you went into the shelf it became bigger?
It's bigger on the inside, believe me. I think it would take you more than a year to watch through all those DVDs. So yeah, you're right. It's bigger on the inside.
The show has certainly changed, regenerated, one might say, in a number of different ways over the years. Is it now too woke?
I think it's disastrous what's happened to Doctor Who. Makes me brings a tear to my eye, really. I think it's almost cultural vandalism. This was a show that I loved as a kid, and I guess I still love it as an adult because I grew up with it. It meant so much to me. And Doctor Who's always, often actually, not always, but often had a sort of subtle political message to it. There are stories from the 70s about barely thinly veiled allegories about Britain joining the common market, about the miners' strike at the time, going into the 80s. There were allegories about Thatcherism and the rest of it. And it's tended to have a slightly left of centre leaning to its politics. Not always, but I consider that fine. Unfortunately, what's happened with the latest iteration of Doctor Who, both this latest incarnation played by Ncuti Gatwa, and I would also argue Jodie Whittaker, the first woman to play the Doctor, the previous iteration, is they're laying on the politics and the message with a trowel. It is so on the nose that it seems that the purpose of the show is to preach a sort of left, liberal, progressive, woke agenda. That's not hidden behind the scenes at all. That seems to be what Doctor Who now exists for. rather than telling an entertaining science fiction story that might have a subtle message attached to it.
Has it become less? Has it become less entertaining as a result? It's perhaps become less entertaining to you because you don't like the message, and I totally understand that. But I suppose the point is, has that overtaken what actually Doctor Who is all about? Could someone just watch it to enjoy it, or are they going to be force-fed wokeism?
It's going to be on the nose. The wokeism is going to be on the nose. It will punch you in the face with the political message that it is preaching to you. There is no subtlety about it whatsoever. And look, fair enough to point out me. You know, I'm now in my 50s. Perhaps Doctor Who isn't for me anymore, and I should just grow up and get over it. But here's the key thing that Russell T Davies, the producer of the show, doesn't appear to appreciate. It's not just oddballs like me on dark corners of the internet who are complaining about this. The audience figures have collapsed. The first episode of the new series, which launched last weekend, was only watched live by 2 million viewers. That's the lowest for any episode in Doctor Who's 62-year history. Now, it is true that generally watching live television is a thing of the past, but nevertheless, the audience is collapsing. And as you pointed out, Peter, this is a sort of flagship, marquee show of the BBC. It's also one of its most expensive shows. By most accounts, it's costing about $1 million an episode. And it's certainly not bringing in the viewers. It's now on a decline, quite a steep decline in viewership. And I would think there's now every evidence that we're not going to see a future season of Doctor Who for a long period of time. Because it's not just awkward old gammons like me who are switching off, it's the wider British public. It's become boring, preachy, almost unwatchable.
I wonder, with that, in regard to that, this sort of go woke, go broke essence of all of this, I wonder whether those low viewing figures will actually force them into action, not necessarily, as you say, people like you or me or whoever who are railing against this, but actually saying, well, hold on a second, whatever we're doing, it's actually not working. Maybe we should go back to the way things were previously, when actually this wasn't about politics, it wasn't about telling people how to live their lives, it was just about an entertaining sci-fi show mainly for children.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sort of family show, and as I say, I accept that it occasionally had a message about morality or the way the state works. It was often quite anti-establishment. It often preached a pacifist message, for example. But that was sotto voce. That was, you know, just a sort of subtle message.
The subtlety has been lost now.
The subtlety has been completely lost. And I mean, this season and the previous one, the Disney Corporation has got involved. They have funded it. I think they're getting a very, very poor rate of return. I expect it to be cancelled, or as they say, put on hiatus. It may be off our screens for some time. But Doctor Who is such a cultural phenomenon, at least in the UK, but in some places abroad, it will come back in some form. And if somebody, the BBC, or if they license it to someone else, wants to bring it back, they need to look at the more vintage Doctor Who, which was hugely popular, got a massive audience, sometimes had an interesting message, but was basically there to entertain and excite. That's what people want on their screens, not to sit down over tea or supper and to be preached at in a liberal left wokey way. Vast numbers of people are switching off, and I think the only people still tuning in are those like me who pray that it's going to get better. But sadly, with each successive episode, it gets worse and more broken than before.
Do you see a point, Mark, where you could go less Doctor Who than Doctor Y, or perhaps even Doctor No?
Yeah, well, that might be right. That might be right. I mean, I'm just praying that somebody resets this. There's been suggestions, hasn't been confirmed yet by the producer, that it may now take a long break. I expect that Disney's going to pull the funding. It's not done anything for them. It is obviously, as an IP, as an intellectual property, very valuable for the BBC.
Yeah.
But they've got to rethink and reset this and go back to what used to make it magical and great. They can rediscover that magic formula, but it's going to need a whole new production team and a whole different way of thinking about it to rediscover the magic that so many of us were brought up on.
Mark, thank you. Appreciate that. That's Mark Littlewood, who's the Director of Popular Conservatism, and huge but perhaps declining Doctor Who fan, certainly not a fan of what is being put out at the moment. Certainly Mike's been in touch. He says, I stopped watching Doctor Who when it stopped being entertainment and started force-feeding the viewer woke messages. Why do you think Doctor Who has dwindling viewing figures? They produce and play it to a teen audience when it's actually us, 40 to 50-year-olds, that are the real fans. Caroline says, as a previous Doctor Who fan, I stopped watching when the BBC introduced the female, woke and boring storylines. Will never watch again, says Caroline. Kenny in Edinburgh says, why isn't Baroness Claire Fox involved in politics? Well, she is, so don't worry. She's in the House of Lords, and she's a former Brexit Party MEP, so she is an active politician, fear not, but I think you mean maybe more of the day-to-day sort of House of Commons stuff, Kenny. She's a nice lady. She talks common sense, more common sense, and only common sense. She's practically a female Cardi B. Wow. Kenny also says the people of Britain owe the Supreme Court a wee pint because finally common sense has prevailed and the Supreme Court has made it official. We're going to talk more about that Supreme Court decision. We're also going to talk about the Great Doctor and migration and sport and whatever else you want to talk about, because there's loads of time to get your voice on the air between now and Kevin O'Sullivan coming up at 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch about Doctor Who and indeed about the Supreme Court judgment. Thank you to Karen in Taunton, who says, my husband and 2 sons are Whovians. It's such a shame what they are doing to the show, says Karen. The Doctor Who Christmas special, says this person, used to be the highlight of the TV year. Now, as a proud Scotsman, to say I would rather stay in and watch England win the World Cup. Wow, tells you how bad it is now. And thank you to Glyn, who says, like Mark Littlewood describing Doctor Who as boring and preachy. That describes most of the BBC these days. They have never recovered from the high days of Mr. Blair having a 3-year honeymoon. Anything to undermine the UK PLC as lefties do, says Glyn. Let's hear a voice note from Crystal on Doctor Who.
I am an American Whovian, and I absolutely love the concept that the Doctor has lived so many different lives and has seen so many different things from the past and the future. And it just makes me wonder why the creators would choose to take the show to such a limited and woke place. I mean, so much of our history is really what we learn from, and that will determine what our future will be. And plus, it's a show, it's sci-fi, and I have laughed and cried watching the oldest doctor, William Hartnell, to the youngest of Matt Smith. And honestly, I can say that I just think that they need to get back to the basics of the show. It's the wisdom of the doctor that is the most important, not the agenda.
I think that is a really, really good point. I'm not a Doctor Who fan, I must say. In fact, I don't even think I've ever watched an entire episode. I know what it is, of course. I'm familiar with all the different regeneration and all the rest of it and all the different doctors. But, Crystal, I think you make a really, really good set of points there. It has to get back to basics. It is this go woke, go broke mantra. And we don't want it, you know, at tea time on a Saturday evening, you don't want the way the world should be in the minds of those who run Doctor Who to be shoved down your throat. What you want is just a bit of entertainment, or you know, watch Gladiators and get people not kicking the lining out of one another. That's much more healthy, much healthier. Wayne has been in touch and says, how long before someone gets the ECHR to overrule the Supreme Court? I think it'll be very soon, Wayne. I think the ECHR, I think this will go to the ECHR. And actually, that's a bit of a misnomer. It's a bit of a silly thing to call it the Supreme Court, thinking like in America that the Supreme Court is exactly the same as the Supreme Court there. It's not. It's the highest court in the UK, but we are still members of the European Convention on Human Rights. We're still members of the European Court on Human Rights. It's different to the EU. Brexit didn't get us out of it, but I think what is going to happen is that will be appealed to the ECHR as well, and I think we're going to be having this debate for some time to come. And I think that many people, including probably Kemi Badenoch, are going to come to a position, not her position currently, that we should withdraw from the ECHR, perhaps even on that particular point. Quite a number of other views on this coming through on Twitter. Sandy says, Peter, can you please stop saying trans women? There is no such thing. There's a woman, there is a man, there are also men who dress up as women. Let's revert to what we used to call them, transvestites. By saying trans women, it's just disrespecting women, Peter. There are no subsets of women. There are just women, the end. And lots on Claire Fox as well. Gosh, you really love her. A great contribution from 100% genuine person. God bless her, said this person. An excellent segment, says James Cox, on the common sense finally seen by the Supreme Court. Baroness Claire Fox is fast becoming a national treasure. Thank you, Peter. Your interview style is the perfect blend of incisive questions, humour and patience. So often you bring out the best from your guests. Brackets, lunatic Islamists accepted. No idea who you're referring to there, James, whatsoever. Doctor Who was once the best show on TV. Now I can't even watch it, says Ed. It's woke rubbish. Bring back Matt Smith. Let's hear a voice note from Paul on Doctor Who.
Hey, Peter. Great show. Paul from Worcestershire here. Yeah, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan myself, and what's been done to Doctor Who in the last, several years now, to be honest with you, is cultural vandalism. As you're, it's sad because Doctor Who was and could still be one of the best and biggest shows on British television, but it's fallen foul to wokery and identity politics, and until it gets out of that, until someone can come along with ideas that unite rather than divide the fan base and the British public, I don't see a future for Doctor Who at all.
Very interesting thoughts from you, Paul. Appreciate that. Thank you to Christopher as well, who says, here's a thought, Peter, it's Chris Nepsom here. The UK's net zero push is noble but botched. Paying £1 million to switch off wind farms while AI firms wait 7 years for power is absurd. It's like Birmingham investing in Icelandic banks pre-2008, chasing high returns without seeing the risk. Scrapping net zero entirely is tempting but unrealistic. It'd tank the UK's global standing and ignore climate realities, IPCC's 1.5 degree warning. Instead, fix the grid, fast-track nuclear, and let AI hyperscalers fund renewable co-location. Otherwise, you're right, financial strain and lost AI leadership could ruin the UK towards commercial ruin. Well, thank you for that, Chris. And plenty of people getting in touch as well on all sorts of issues. Doctor Who is, of course, one of them. I'll read out one more about this from Jane, who says, just listening to Doctor Who, I couldn't believe my ears. The same I was listening to The Archers the other day, and that has become so left-wing. You're not the only person who said that to me, Jane, it must be said. It's ridiculous. It started off talking about climate change and ended up having a discussion in the pub about the new farmers' inheritance tax. I only listen to the Archers because it reminds me of my mum, and I shan't be listening anymore. Typical BBC preaching. Keep up the good work, says Jane. Well, Jane, there's only one radio station you need, and it is, of course, Talk. Lots to discuss on Rachel Reeves as well in the last hour. The Chancellor has spoken about the Supreme Court ruling. Let's hear what she had to say, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
I welcome the decision by the court to give clarity to women, but also give clarity to service providers going forward, and we welcome that judgment.
When will you be giving that clarity and issuing new guidance on how to apply it in places like hospitals?
Well, the EHRC will be giving that guidance, and they will set that out in due course, but this now gives the clarity that's needed to move forward.
That's Rachel Reeves there. She was in some sort of factory. She's wearing a hard hat and some protective glasses, and certainly giving some clarity there, I suppose. Not saying a huge amount, but really saying that the government accepts this. Of course, it's the Supreme Court. Some people have been in touch to say actually it's not actually possible to take it to the European Court of Human Rights. I'd be very interested to hear from someone, a barrister or someone who knows these things in regard to that. Perhaps we can check that out, whether it's possible actually to bring this even higher up. I don't know. There are all sorts of different grounds on which you can bring cases and appeals and so on. But certainly, as Rachel Reeves says there, there's a difference, of course, between the ECHR and the EHRC. So don't get those mixed up. The ECHR is, of course, the European Convention and indeed Court on Human Rights. But here in the UK, we have an organisation called the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which will give out all that guidance in terms of how these different organisations should deal with this. Certainly, the British Transport Police, as we know from earlier on today, have said that they are going to change their guidance in terms of how people are searched. I want to hear a voice note now from Ian on the police hunting Easter eggs. We've been hearing about this story right throughout the afternoon. Peter Blexley was on a little bit earlier on about the Metropolitan Police's counter-terrorism unit. They're having an Easter egg hunt. This is what Ian thinks of that.
Hi Peter, it's Ian from East Grinstead. The police and their Easter egg hunt, knowing how good they are finding things, did they find any, or are they still out looking?
It's a very good point. Maybe they've been given, as one person suggested earlier, a crime reference number for those missing Easter eggs. I had an Easter egg earlier today. They're very good to us here. There's a woman who sits on reception. Her name's Jo, and she's great. And she's a cat person as well. And she had a load of Easter eggs today, and I took one, and she said it's fine to take one from the desk. There were quite a few of them sitting there, but she said, look, you've got to share it with people. And I did. I mean, you know, my colleagues will attest to this. I offered it to lots of different people. It was a Milky Bar one, and not everybody likes white chocolate. And tragically, I had to eat the whole thing myself. But, you know, we live and learn, and tomorrow is another day. Herbie is in Harrow and wants to talk about migrants, and of course Ian Collins was talking about the hotels and the big issue. It's an issue we return to on this programme. We know that there are 8,888 migrants who've come this year alone. Herbie, how do we solve this problem, do you think?
Peter, we've got no hope, no chance. The amount of migrants coming over daily now, over 700, how many more hotels can we fulfil?
Well, it's a very good point. Now, 705, that was the highest number, the highest day this year. So it's not that every single day, but there are a heck of a lot of people, thousands of them, who have come over this year alone, to say nothing of within the time that Labour have been in power. And they say they want to smash the gangs. I don't see a huge amount of evidence of that, Herbie. Maybe you do.
No, not at all, Peter. The thing is that it won't be long before the smugglers will be bringing them over in the ferry to, you know, give them first class trip over to the UK into the first class accommodation that we're giving them. The hotels are going to run out at the rate these people are coming out. What's the government going to do then? We can't house our own people, yet we can house migrants that are very illegally. It just doesn't make sense any longer. I just feel the tension getting worse and worse. The bubble's going to blow before very long, Peter. It's got to.
It's very, very difficult for people who live in those areas, and certainly they've seen the complexion of those areas change, and it just comes down to the fact that there are lots of people who just have contributed nothing to this economy who are nonetheless living a very, very nice life, Herbie, in a way that so many people who have contributed to this economy, who are maybe pensioners who've had their winter fuel allowance taken away. I want to know, you know, if Keir Starmer wants to smash the gangs, well, that's fair enough, but actually, is he going to look after the people here who have paid into this country as well?
Yeah, but Peter, He kees on saying the smash. They're doing absolutely nothing. Do you hear them talking about this migrant crisis on a daily basis or a weekly basis or monthly? Not at all. I do not know what is behind it all. There's something very strange going on somewhere, and I just can't put my finger on to what it could be, Peter, because this is just madness, absolute madness. It can't carry on indefinitely like this, otherwise we're all going to sink. I'll tell you that for nothing.
Herbie, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Herbie in Harrow. He's giving me a ring at 0344 499 1000. You can do the same thing. You can send me a text, 87222, with the word talk in your text. You can send me as well a voice note if you want to on the main number. You can send me a text message via WhatsApp on the main number. You can ring me on the main number, 0344 499 1000. I'll go through my phone during the break as well as I gen up on the sport. You know, I have a deep and incredibly interested knowledge of sport. And it's not just as if Ryan, the producer, writes the questions for me or anything like that. I mean, that would just be shameful. But we are going to be talking to Uma Gurav in a second, and certainly it was a great night for Arsenal last night. We'll be getting Uma's thoughts on that. Stay with us.
What it boils down to is a legalization of illegal migration, because when you take the one who arrived here illegally and you replace him by one that's been sent to us by France legally, that we've effectively legalized illegal migration. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And so nothing could do more than to encourage people from their general movement from Syria, North Africa and elsewhere into Europe than this scheme.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you for your company on Talk Drive this evening. Now it is time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
Uma Gurav, who is a Talk Sport presenter, joins us. Uma, great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm excellent, shall we say.
I see what
know
you
how
did
much
there.
you like Easter puns.
The good thing is that no one's ever used that pun before when it comes to Easter, so I think you're probably the first one.
Wow. Thank you.
No, I had a Milky Bar one. Other brands are available, but I do love white chocolate. What will you be tucking into on Sunday?
Oh, I love a white chocolate. I found these Malteser white chocolate bunnies. They're amazing. I've got to
Amazing.
get some more of those. I've already
Excellent.
eaten them all.
Yeah, someone gave me some mini eggs the other night, and they've just gone. They're just disappeared. Someone made me a mini egg cake actually, which was lovely, which I haven't eaten all of yet, but there's another slice of it which will be going the way of the dodo later on this evening. Let me tell you. Listen, speaking of a great night, it was a great night for me. I got the Easter egg cake. It was a great night for Arsenal last night. They're the last British team left in the Champions League. They're going to be facing Paris Saint-Germain. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, all the talk before their game against Real Madrid was about la remontada, so the Spanish word for comeback, because everyone was tipping Real Madrid to come back from that 3-0 deficit. But there was no such comeback on the night. Arsenal held their own. In the end, the score was 2-1, but overall, on aggregate, that meant that Arsenal won 5-1. It was a bizarre game. There was a penalty that was and a penalty that wasn't. Bukayo Saka, who's been so amazing for Arsenal since he came back, he missed a penalty, but then went on to score later on in the game. And ultimately, Arsenal put the game to bed. But it's quite unnerving seeing Arsenal go so far in a competition after everyone sort of knows them for bottling things. They've been accused of doing that so much in the last few seasons, but now they've got a real chance of winning this. Honestly, I think you'd say that all 4 teams left in this, there's no one team who you'd say are the favourite to win it. If anything, it might well be Arsenal.
We will watch that with great interest. And tonight, actually, attention turns to the Europa League. Spurs, Man United, Glasgow Rangers. What do they all have to do? Go through each of them and tell us what you think will happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, who's not feeling very happy today? Spurs fans. And Postecoglou, is this the night where he has to kind of save his job, or even is his job already kind of gone and this is just the night to see whether or not he can go with any kind of grace? They're in the Europa League against Eintracht Frankfurt. They drew in the first leg, so now they've got to win the away leg of that one if they're to get through to the next round of the Europa League. And Postecoglou not doing well, already talks about who his successor could be. Same for Ruben Amorim, but he's a manager in a very different situation at Man United. He's fresh in through the door. They also drew their first leg 2-2. They have to overcome Lyon if they're to get through there as well. And Rangers also drew their first leg against Athletic Bilbao. So basically, it's a level playing field for all 3 of the British teams. And I'd put money on most of them, I think, to go through. Rangers will have the toughest task, I think. But for Spurs and Man United, it's all or nothing now for the managers.
And good news for Liverpool. Their star centre-back has signed a new contract. How long is he remaining at Liverpool?
So like Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk has signed a 2-year contract keeping him at Anfield until the summer of 2027. We kind of knew this was happening at TalkSport. We've been reporting it for a couple of weeks, but the club made it official today. A very romantic message from Virgil van Dijk almost on the club page. He was saying, I always knew it was Liverpool. There was nowhere else for me. I'm not sure that's entirely true because I'm not sure why they left it that long.
The huge heap of money they've given me in a big truck has helped the love as well. I mean, I would play for Liverpool if they just gave me as much money as he got. I would play for any team probably if they give me as much money as he's got. I mean, I do love all this kind of, oh, I'm so incredibly loyal. And some players are loyal, but let's face it, most of them see the pound signs or the dollar signs or whatever signs from Saudi Arabia.
Well, exactly. This is the thing. And I'm not sure any other clubs really came in seriously for him. He is 33. Liverpool are taking, I guess, not a risk exactly because he's been so solid for them. But by the time this contract ends, he's going to be 35, which is quite old for one of your starting centre-backs. And you expect to see him kind of phased out, I guess, over the next few years. But yeah, I'm not sure anyone else came in for Virgil van Dijk. And, you know, the interesting thing is when he joined Liverpool, it was under quite cloudy circumstances because he left Southampton having a bit of a furore. He'd handed in a transfer request. Things were a bit unsavoury. There were rumours he hadn't wanted to train there. So, you know, I think they're lucky that the same thing didn't really happen to them because, you know, who knows what would have happened if, like you said, a Saudi club had come in, somewhere like Real Madrid had come in and snatched him up.
Uma, your egg puns have been defended by some of our viewers and listeners. They say I'm too harsh. One said it was cracking, so thank you to that. Also, Karen in Taunton has been in touch and says white chocolate is not chocolate. It's a crime against chocolate. The only chocolate worth eating is a Galaxy or Terry's Chocolate Orange. Where do you stand on Terry's Chocolate Orange, do you think?
I like chocolate oranges. I don't like cream eggs.
Yeah.
So,
actually, sorry, it's Tony's chocolate. That's the Chocolonely ones, which I'm actually a big fan of. The ones that are salted caramel. But listen, I sense we're slightly off topic, and I have a couple of voice notes to go through as well. But listen, I wish you a very, very happy Easter, Uma. Will we be seeing you tomorrow for the sport?
Unfortunately, you won't be treated to me and my wonderful yolks anymore.
Very good. They just keep on coming. Excellent stuff. Uma, thank you. We'll see you after Easter. Happy Easter. Enjoy the break as well. Lots of people have been in touch on all sorts of things, not just the chocolatey questions over what constitutes chocolate and what doesn't, but actually on Doctor Who. Dave has been in touch.
Doctor Who. When I was a kid, I used to hide behind the sofa. It used to scare the living out of me, if you know what I mean. Everything's getting ruined, mate, isn't it? Even Doctor Who.
Yeah, but should it still be as scary now, Dave? I mean, if it scares you as an adult, is that a positive thing? The police hunting Easter eggs. Simon's been in touch.
Just heard about those coppers going out searching for Easter eggs. I wonder whether Keir Starmer's going to release a statement soon saying he's going to smash the eggs.
Very good. That is really excellent. And perhaps politically you'll pull a rabbit from the hat. You never know. We could keep going down this route, and feel free to do so. I mean, I think probably every Easter pun ever has been used, not just in the last 5 minutes, but certainly there we are. Craig in Sutherland says, I'm surprised Milky Bar chocolate hasn't been banned for being a white supremacist chocolate. I hope it isn't banned. I do like white chocolate, I must say. I like all chocolate. Actually, I don't really like dark chocolate, but anyway, there we are. We're getting away from perhaps the biggest issues. We're going to talk in just a second to Brendan O'Neill. He's the chief political writer for Spiked, about everything that's going on at the moment. Also a plan for GPs to keep millions of people out of hospital. They're going to be rewarded for that financially as well. Also a strong hint of alien life found on a planet 124 light years away. What do you think of this? Do you think alien life is something that is there? We're going to be talking in the next hour as well about the White House expecting a UK trade deal within 3 weeks.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Thursday evening. Lots to discuss in the next hour before Kevin O'Sullivan is here between 7 and 9, including the fallout from that historic decision yesterday by the Supreme Court. Men are men and women are women, where the British Transport Police have changed their policy already. I think lots more institutions are going to do so. We're also talking about Keir Starmer and his reaction. We've heard from Rachel Reeves on that this evening. Also, whether his net zero deal is going to drive up energy bills. Doctor Who as well. Lots of people getting in touch on Doctor Who. Has it gone too woke? The boss of Doctor Who has hit back and said that they don't care, basically. A strong hint of alien life. We're talking about Nigerian fraudsters avoiding deportation because of autistic children, and the White House expecting a UK trade deal very, very soon. Donald Trump's been talking about that in the last few minutes, and we'll talk to Jennifer Ewing from Republicans Overseas about that a little bit later on. Lots to discuss, including with Brendan O'Neill, the chief political writer of Spiked, who's coming up in just a moment. And of course, I want to hear what you have to say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can do one of three things with the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, you can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please, or indeed give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7 here on Talk. Thanks to Archangel, who's been in touch on Twitter. He says, Cardi P, the whole gender critical movement is steeped in misandry. They never seem to mention trans men or the safety, privacy, dignity and the rights of boys and men. It's just another opportunity to demonise males, with male victims and female perpetrators ignored as always, says Archangel. Plenty of decisions, well, one big decision made, but plenty of opinions on this, certainly. Let's get another one from Brendan O'Neill. He's the chief political writer of Spiked. What do you make, Brendan, first of all, you're very welcome to the programme this evening. What do you make not just of what the Supreme Court has done, but some of the reaction to it really over the last 24 plus hours, including from British Transport Police? They have said that they're revising their policies in terms of how people are searched.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's very good. It's a good start. I think it's proof that this is an earthquake. This ruling is going to send shudders through the whole country. And I think it has to. I think, you know, we really lost our way on this question. We've lived under a political class that struggles even to answer the question, what is a woman? We've got a prime minister who once said that some women have penises. We have institutions that allow men who identify as women to search women, to go into women's prisons, to go into women's domestic violence shelters, to go into women's changing rooms. We're in a real mess on the sex question. And this court case, this court ruling, I think will shake that up if there is the political will to make sure that it happens.
Well, let's hope the political will is there. Rachel Reeves is the Chancellor. She's been out and about today, and she has been talking about the Supreme Court ruling. This is what she said.
I welcome the decision by the court to give clarity to women, but also give clarity to service providers going forward, and we welcome that judgment.
When will you be giving that clarity and issuing new guidance on how to apply it in places like hospitals?
Well, the EHRC will be giving that guidance, and they will set that out in due course, but this now gives the clarity that's needed to move forward.
We know, of course, Brendan, that the EHRC, that's the Equality and Human Rights Commission, will give that guidance. But we've seen already with the British Transport Police, I'm sure there are many other organisations as well, acting quickly and saying even interim measures that are being put forward to make sure that they adhere to this ruling, because this is a controversial ruling for many people. It's a very sensible ruling for other people, but we have this statement even from the British Transport Police this evening saying that trans women in custody will be searched by male officers in a change to their policy in light of the Supreme Court ruling, they say. The force says its new interim position would see trans people held in custody searched by an officer in line with their birth sex. So things are changing already, Brandon, aren't they?
They are. And, you know, but the question I keep asking myself is, why did it take this ruling for all of this to happen?
Yep.
You know, why why did we need 5 judges to tell us what a woman is? There was a time when everyone over the age of 5 knew what a woman was. You know, even our Neanderthal forebears knew what a woman was. They knew there were men, they knew they were women, and they knew that there were differences between them. We've known this since we first came down from the trees. And yet in 2025, this age of dazzling technological advancement, we apparently need a court of law to explain to us exactly what a woman is. I think it's a real testament to the lunacy that grabbed the elites in this country and other countries over the past few years.
I'm interested, Brendan, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm interested why that lunacy grabbed them, because we had the Equality Act in 2010, and it's really since then, over a 15-year period, that this has been such a huge issue. It's been a big political debate, lots of people talking about it, and what I have seen, and I'd love your analysis and impression of this, but what I have seen is an awful lot of people, especially senior politicians, especially in recent years, actually running away from this debate, running away from answering a straightforward question: what is a woman?
Yeah, exactly right. I think it's a combination of moral cowardice. People didn't want to seem to be on the wrong side of the supposedly progressive issue, and also capture. Some people were legitimately captured by the idea, which I personally think is a crazy idea, which is that a man can become a woman, and that a man who identifies as a woman is literally a woman. That is what we have been told for the past few years. And to some of us, it always sounded like a neo-religious gobbledygook. It seems that some in the establishment are now cottoning onto that as well. But, you know, the fact that until today, the British Transport Police and other institutions would allow a male who identifies as a female to search women. I mean, that is appalling. That was an appalling violation of women's privacy and women's dignity, that they could be subjected to that. I'm glad this court ruling has happened. I'm glad it seems to be bringing people to their senses, but I'm kind of horrified that we needed this to know these basic things.
And what do you think that says about our society, that we did need this to happen? Because there are so many people who will say, hold on a second, as you are saying, and as I have been saying, that it's just so completely obvious. And I wonder if about the minority, essentially the tail wagging the dog in a lot of this debate over the last number of years as well, Brendan.
Yeah, and it also, I think it demonstrates how quickly a kind of modern day hysteria can spread. And, you know, I often think that in the future, we will probably look back on this era in the way that we look back on lobotomies. We often say to ourselves, how could we have lived in a society 70 or 80 years ago in which people were given lobotomies? It seems cruel and ridiculous and unnecessary. I genuinely think that in the future, we will look back on the fact that we drugged children who were confused about their gender. We subjected young lesbians to surgery to turn them into supposed men, and that everyone went along with it. Everyone nodded along as if this was perfectly normal behavior. We let rapists go into women's prisons. We let men go into women's changing rooms where there are women and girls. We let men play in women's sports and take women's medals. All of this happened under the noses of a supposedly modern secular society. And I do think we need a huge reckoning with how this happened and how we can prevent something like this from ever happening again.
Will the reckoning happen, or do you think there'll be a repeated resistance against the Supreme Court ruling?
I think there will definitely be resistance. We're already seeing a bit of a meltdown amongst the kind of supposedly woke left and trans activists and so on, even though the ruling makes clear that trans people have protections as well in law. It's just that they're not protected by women's rights. They're protected by their own category. I think there will be resistance. There will be pushback. There will be a renewed fight for so-called trans rights. But there's been a change now. I think there's been a huge opening of people's eyes to the fact that what is called trans rights poses a direct threat to women's rights. And women's rights have been hard won. Women have been fighting for these rights for decades, if not centuries. The right to work, the right to vote, the right to their own spaces, the right to their own domestic violence shelters. These are things that women fought hard for. And over the past 10 years, they've been massively undermined by our inclusion of men who identify as women in those spaces. So I think the reckoning will come. I think this ruling ruling, probably the best thing about it, I think, is that it will start that reckoning, but we're going to have to push it even further.
Brandon, I wonder if I can ask you about another story that's been brought to our attention this afternoon by Peter Blexley. He's our crime commentator here at Talk. He's also a former Metropolitan Police detective. This is about the Metropolitan Police counter-terrorism department having an Easter egg hunt. I'm not against people having a bit of fun at work necessarily, but shouldn't they just be catching terrorists?
Yeah, you would think so. I mean,
call me old-fashioned.
What an old-fashioned, sensible view that they should be out there catching terrorists. I mean, there's plenty to do on that front. We know that there are lots of radical Islamists in this country and other kinds of terrorists as well. We know that they're out there. Whether or not they're plotting attacks as we speak, that's for the police to know and for the police to find out. But we know that this is a threat to our nation. We know that over the past 20 years, since 7/7, around 100 people have been killed by radical Islamist terrorists. This is a very serious issue, and it impacts on a lot of communities in this country. So, you know, yes, people can have some fun, but it does look like that's a slight waste of police time if they're doing an Easter egg hunt rather than looking for people in this country who might be posing a direct threat to us.
And are you a Doctor Who fan, Brandon?
I'm not, even less so now that it's gone woke, but I've never really...
There are plenty of people, including a big Doctor Who fan we spoke to earlier, Mark Littlewood, that says that it's, you know, the sort of wokeness is being shoved down the viewers' throats. It's meant to be entertainment, certainly, and we've had one of the senior people on Doctor Who saying, I don't care. I mean, if I were being criticised for being woke, that's actually a good thing.
I just think that's such a haughty, kind of snooty attitude. It's almost like they think that their TV shows have to re-educate the masses. You know, you have to look at all this kind of gender fluid propaganda and all these trans storylines and all this kind of diversity stuff that Doctor Who now celebrates. You need to see that, you dumb viewers, in order that you become more socially aware. That's essentially what these people think. And when I saw Russell T Davies saying that these are just the complaints of online warriors, and why would you breathe in their fumes? Why would you breathe in their toxicity? I'm sorry, but that's such a snobby attitude to have to ordinary people who don't like being lectured when they're just trying to enjoy the TV. And I think that's the kind of... People want to watch TV that's entertaining, not that TV that is all about socially re-engineering them.
And the lower viewing figures would certainly attest to your thinking on that, Brendan. Just one other thing I'd like to ask you about, which is about this plan, the government's plan for GPs to keep millions out of hospital. They're going to be given £20 to per patient, per appointment, essentially, that doesn't happen at a hospital but happens at GPs' surgeries. The waiting lists have gone down to some degree. It does seem that the government has made some progress on this. I just wonder if this latest plan will work, do you think?
I think it might. I've been reading about it today. I think that some of the conditions that they list that they think would be better treated by GPs rather than in a hospital, I think it sounds sensible. You know, irritable bowel syndrome, or some of the symptoms of menopause. You know, these kinds of things where it really ought to be something dealt with in a GP surgery rather than packing hospitals with yet more patients. But I am slightly concerned that if there is this financial incentive of 20 quid per patient who's kept out of hospitals, I worry that that will create a race to prevent people from going to hospital. And there could be dangers in that as well. You know, there are times when people need to go to a hospital. So we have to be careful in how we enact policies like this one.
Brendan, thanks for your thoughts this evening. That's Brendan O'Neill there. He's the Chief Political Writer at Spiked. Plenty to discuss. Let me know your thoughts on what Brendan has said. 0344 499 1000. We've been sort of dancing around the issue of whether alien life has been found on a planet 124 light years from Earth. We're going to continue to talk about that. If you want to give me your thoughts on that, 0344 499 1000 as well. You're very welcome to get in touch. In just a second, we're going to talk to Henry Smith. He's a former Conservative MP, about an idea for an asylum scheme. We know that 705 illegal immigrants crossed the channel in 24 hours earlier this week, and there's a Nigerian fraudster who has avoided deportation. Why? Because his children are autistic. Yes, really. Stay with us here on Talk.
obviously, we're just incredibly pleased with this decision, and I really want to pay tribute to For Women Scotland, who have fought and fought and fought for years. They're all volunteers. They've just been fighting because it's so important for the women of Scotland, for the women of the UK, and I think that this will reverberate around the world. But we intervened, LGB Alliance and a number of lesbian groups, because of the rights of lesbians, which are constantly overlooked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, within the last few minutes in the White House, Donald Trump has talked about his optimism, certainly, in regard to a trade deal with Europe. We're going to be talking about this just a little bit later on this hour. He says there will be a trade deal, 100%. Of course, there will be a trade deal. They want to make one very much. We are going to make a trade deal, I fully expect, but it will be a fair deal. That's in regard to the EU. So far, he's prioritised talks with Japan, Korea and other Indo-Pacific nations in hopes of increasing pressure on China. China, of course, but he's been speaking to Georgia Maloney, the first European leader to visit the White House since those tariffs have been imposed. We'll talk to Jennifer Ewing about that a little bit later on. She's from Republicans Overseas, and of course ask the question in regard to whether a trade deal here for the UK could be closer. That's something a lot of people want to happen. It would give certainty to business and has been talked about within the last 24 hours. JD Vance has hinted towards it, as have other White House officials, people behind the scenes as well. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. The Supreme Court thing is something people want to talk about a lot more as well. Mike in Lincoln has been in touch and says, well, I see the Supreme Court ruling as a common sense coming back to the fore. I have a mid-20s trans daughter who is fully post-op. I will say now, if by some bizarre coincidence she had to be body searched, if it was by a male police officer, I'd be going ballistic. There doesn't seem to be any thought in all the commentary for those who are genuine post-op dysmorphic trans, says Mike in Lincoln there, talking about his child there, his mid-20s trans daughter he has told us about. Right then, let's talk about ministers plotting what has been called a one-in, one-out asylum scheme. We know earlier in the week 705 illegal migrants came across the Channel in just 24 hours. And so far this year, the figure is 8,888. Lucky for some, of course, but 42% higher than this time in 2024. So the government are talking to officials in Paris over the new scheme to accept legal migrants seeking to join their families in the UK in exchange for illegal migrants who would be sent back to France. Is this going to make a massive difference? Well, let's find out with Henry Smith. He's a former Conservative MP. Henry, thank you for joining me this evening. Is this going to solve things in any way? Is it going to help hugely? I mean, presumably we're talking about relatively small numbers here.
Well, good evening. I can't decide whether this new announced policy is either cynical or naive, but I don't think it will work. What it will do is it will essentially legalize illegal crossings into the United Kingdom across the English Channel. And if Labour manage to get an agreement with the French on this, we'll see small boat numbers reduce, because those individuals will just be being allowed into this country on ferries and via the Channel Tunnel through this new legal route. So it won't actually stop the amount of migrants coming to this country who otherwise would have no right to be here. It'll just make it along more official routes, which will seem to solve the problem, but in reality it will still mean tens of thousands of people arriving here and all the pressure that puts on our public services and our housing. So I'm extremely sceptical about it. And I think we need to learn lessons from previous deals that have been done with the French. They haven't acted in good faith in the past. They've facilitated illegal English Channel crossings of migrants, despite the fact that in the past we've given them tens of millions of pounds to supposedly help us.
Well, half a billion,
I'm very suspicious.
half a billion a year, actually, Henry, and it's very, very interesting in regard to the French because they just haven't kept up their side of the deal in a lot of this. So should we actually be negotiating yet further with them?
No, I don't think we should, because the French haven't been particularly helpful. And as I say, they have cost an awful lot of money in terms of us sending that to France and not fixing the problem. As you said, crossings up 42% on this time last year. Clearly something isn't working. And why should the United Kingdom do deals with countries like France to sort of plead with them and pay for them to take migrants back? We just shouldn't be accepting illegal migrants in the first place. And that's why we need to leave the ECHR, which stops so many migrants from being removed from this country, or we need to get a carve-out when it comes to immigration on that. Until that happens, this problem will continue to carry on and, I fear, get worse.
And yet another story that we read in the Times today about a Nigerian fraudster who was jailed for 7 years after abusing the government's coronavirus business loan scheme. He can't be deported. This time, the excuse is that he has autistic children. This is Olufemi Adeneyi Ajali, who is in prison after being convicted of taking a leading role in a sophisticated fraud during the pandemic. He was found guilty of having immorally defrauded the loan scheme, which gave small businesses up to £50,000. The Home Office said that he should be deported to Nigeria. He appealed the decision, and 2 specialist asylum judges have now backed his claim on, guess what, human rights law grounds. This would be unduly harsh on 2 of his 4 British children because they had autism and significant additional needs, apparently. Perhaps he should have thought about that before he defrauded us of 50 grand.
Well, exactly. I mean, it is just appalling. The average hardworking, tax-paying British citizen, increasingly paying more tax British citizen, are just fed up with activist judges, again, using the human rights legislation, which the Blair government introduced and signed us fully up to, meaning...
in fairness, the Conservatives didn't repeal it.
Well, and you're absolutely right. One of the reasons why I didn't seek re-election last year was because I increasingly got disillusioned with the fact that Conservatives weren't dealing with this issue. Until we change the human rights legislation to really make that these illegal immigrants and criminals, convicted criminals, cannot just play the system. Until we change that, this is just going to get worse. And we've seen countless examples. There was one last week where somebody managed to prevent being deported because they had too many Facebook friends in this country. It is just absurd.
Some of the excuses are absolutely ridiculous. It's interesting in that some other countries do seem to be getting some sort of a grip on this, and now we hear from Germany that single healthy male asylum seekers who have travelled to Germany via Greece can be deported back to Greece, and this is the Federal Administrative Court in Leipzig ruling that asylum seekers who meet the criteria can cope with a lack of state support in Greece because they will not face inhumane treatment there. But actually this could have quite an effect in regard to asylum seekers coming here. It's just going to make places that aren't Germany, e.g. the United Kingdom, even more attractive to these would-be asylum seekers as well. And it does bother me a lot that the Dublin Agreement, which where asylum seekers are supposed to have their claims processed in the first EU country they enter, those rules are just barely and rarely enforced, Henry.
Well, this is the absurdity. Almost all of those who are claiming asylum in this country have come from a safe country to get here, whether that be France or in some cases Belgium, Germany, other parts of Europe. Very few people arrive here directly from a third country where they feel threatened. So it is a mockery of the system. It need not be like this. We can Parliament could change it. Parliament came together on a Saturday last week to resolve, or I don't think they have resolved it, but to try and resolve the British Steel situation. Parliament could pass legislation again in a single day to repeal those parts of human rights legislation to say that it doesn't apply to these immigration cases, and it would solve the problem.
I'm sorry to have interrupted you there, Henry, but you're absolutely right. And actually, we keep being told, oh, it's all about complicated, oh, it's all about difficult. Well, actually, what the last sort of 10 days or so have shown us is that actually, if the government does want to pull its finger out, any government of any stripe, and do something quickly, it can, especially when it has a huge majority. Even if the Conservatives had opposed what Labour did last Saturday, they could have said, you know what, we have a massive majority, we're going to do this, we're going to make sure that it is pushed through, and we'll do what we want to do. It can be done, it can be done quickly, these things can be solved, and major changes can be made in our society.
You're absolutely right. And in a sense, Keir Starmer and the Labour government are gaslighting the British people by saying we're going to smash the gangs, we're going to tackle illegal migration. And then, of course, they do nothing about it in practicality, except perhaps doing some sort of backroom deal that's going to cost taxpayers even more money with the French that won't be effective, that will just really hide the problem of illegal migrants coming into this country, because it'll essentially decriminalise illegal immigration, if I understand what they're planning correctly. Where there is a will, there is a way, and we saw last Saturday that where the government want to pass legislation in a single day, which is unusual, it happens occasionally, but which is unusual, it can be done, and yet we don't see any urgency when it comes to what would be possible to repeal those parts of human rights legislation that means effectively we have an open border, and worse than that, when people are in this country and commit serious criminal offences, can't be deported because of the most ridiculous and spurious reasons.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Henry Smith there, former Conservative MP. There's some breaking news here on Talk as well, and that is that 3 people have died, 1 is seriously injured, and another is missing after a cable car crashed to the ground near Naples, of course in southern Italy. The accident happened at a peak around 45 kilometres, about 28 miles southeast of Naples. The cabin at the top has crashed. Casualties are feared. The chairman of the EAV public transport company, which runs the cable car service, said he also called it a tragedy, and that is the breaking news that 3 people have died, 1 is seriously injured and another is missing after a cable car crashed to the ground near Naples in southern Italy. Of course, between now and 7, and Kevin O'Sullivan between 7 and 10 will bring you up to date if there's any further news there, certainly. But 1 person is missing, 1 is seriously injured, and 3 people have died after that cable car crashed to the ground. In a moment, we will reflect on what's happening in America and indeed what that means for us, because Jennifer Ewing, a spokeswoman for Republicans overseas, is joining us because the White House says it expects a UK trade deal very, very soon. And we have seen that the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Maloney, has been in the White House talking to President Trump about all this. We'll reflect on all of that with Jennifer Ewing in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, within the last hour or so, the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Maloney, she's been at the White House, and both she and President Trump have expressed optimism during their meeting about an eventual trade deal between the United States and the EU. Now, Trump has said there will be a trade deal, 100%. Of course, there will be a trade deal. They want to make one very much, and we are going to make a trade deal. I fully expect it, but it will be a fair deal. Now, so far, he's talked to Japan, Korea, and other Indo-Pacific regions in hopes of increasing pressure on China. China, of course, because there have been huge tariffs for them of 125%. Now, Giorgia Maloney is the first European leader to visit the White House since those tariffs have been imposed. And of course, the European Union previously had 20%, now it has 10%. We have always had about 10%, although there are different tariffs on individual items as well. Now we're hearing that, both from what J.D. Vance has said and also a White House official has told the Telegraph newspaper, that an agreement is expected soon, 2 weeks or maybe 3, the source told the Telegraph. Jennifer Ewing is spokeswoman for Republicans overseas. She joins me now. Jennifer, how close do you think a deal is and why?
I think it is quite close, Peter. And the reason beyond just the special relationship is because Trump likes to make these bilateral deals, right? So you can see he actually has had a pretty decent relationship with our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, which might be surprising to some, but I think he does want to do a deal there. You're seeing today, as you just mentioned, Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Maloney's gone over there. So he'll be talking to her in a bilateral fashion as well. But what's interesting is both of these Prime Ministers of the UK and Italy are probably receiving pressure from Ursula von der Leyen, in the EU, but then also wanting to do what's right for their individual country. Trump will obviously be encouraging them to do an Italy first or a Great Britain first, just how he's done in his own country. So I think that'll be very interesting to see how that balance is made. But with regards to the timing, I have a good friend, contact, who works at a special relationship unit at Prosperity, and their report is coming out quite soon. So I think what was the one sort of funny sticking point, the chlorinated chicken and that sort of thing. I think some research has come out to say, actually, this should not be what holds up the deal, because actually you're getting more chlorine just from the water. And in order for you to be damaged by an American chlorine washed chicken, you'd probably have to eat about 5 a day for a long period of time.
Yes, and even with my abs and pecs, I don't get through that much protein, it must be said, Jennifer. It's interesting in regard to why he's talking to Italy, why he's prioritising, of course, the Indo-Pacific nations as well. Pressure on China is a big thing, and it really is President Trump trying to target China in all of this. How do you think the trade war is going? Because there are many Americans I speak to, usually Democratic supporters, of course, who will say that actually it's bad for America rather than good for America.
Well, I agree, Peter. It depends on who you talk to. And I have very good friends who have businesses in China who, would say exactly the same thing you're saying. This is not going to end well for the United States. So whereas you talk to people in the United States and they go, nope, China is going to eventually end up caving because they need, the greatest consumer in the world to buy all of their cheap goods. Hopefully, things will de-escalate and we can come down to a place where, sure, maybe Americans are not, buying all of these constant cheap goods from China, but nobody wants a trade war. That's not good for China. It's not good for the United States. But I think anybody that tells you that it's just so obvious it's better for one person, one country rather than the other, it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Certainly, and I wonder, Keir Starmer obviously is a very different person. He's got a very different style, he's got very different politics to Donald Trump, but the two seem to get on reasonably well. But really what we were told by the White House is sort of behave yourself and note don't have reciprocal tariffs and you'll be looked after. But actually, the United Kingdom largely in the same position now as it was at the start of this process, whereas you could argue the EU has been in some way actually rewarded with its tariffs going down from 20 to 10%. The next now fewer than 90 days time period is going to be absolutely crucial for all of that. But I just wondered what you would say to people perhaps in the United Kingdom who are a bit cynical about this, who think actually, are we going to be looked after in any way, or is there just going to be pain ahead?
Sure. I understand what you're saying. If you look at the numbers, it does look like the EU was rewarded. But that was part of a bigger 90-day, let's de-escalate this entire thing. The EU just started out as a higher number, so it looks better for them. I do not believe they're being rewarded in any way. I don't think Trump is a fan of the EU. He does not like these big, large blocks of countries. Like he said, he was a fan of Brexit, and he would prefer to deal with each country individually. Actually, I think he'd go through 27 nations and do deals individually rather than do one for the EU. So I do think that things will turn out very well for the UK and the US. But yeah, the US is probably going to call the shots, but the UK is going to, if we can get past our chlorinated chicken issue, they'll be okay.
It's interesting with J.D. Vance, obviously a much more influential vice president than many previously, and certainly far more than Kamala Harris ever was. He has said, he of course sent the FTSE 100 index of the biggest companies, on the publicly traded companies in the UK, surging by predicting that Trump would agree a great trade deal because of, as he said, the cultural affinity with Britain. How big a player and how crucial do you think those words and the role of J.D. Vance is in all this, Jennifer?
Well, Peter, you will remember years ago, probably years ago, I was a fan of J.D. Vance. I read his book back in 2016. I think he's literally the American dream. Having said that, he absolutely has even far surpassed my expectations of what a vice president would do. I don't know if you've read the recent New York Times article about it was him and Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth that perhaps stopped beginning of World War III with this attack on Iran. So he's got influence in a defense way. And then when he is sent around Europe to say things, whether it's, you guys need to start protecting yourself with regards to NATO or free speech. He's been very, very outspoken about free speech. He got very involved with the situation with the woman that went to, or the man who went to prison for silently praying. So he's gotten involved in cultural issues, foreign policy issues, all sorts of issues. And he would not be doing that without the blessing of the president. So actually, speaking of Italy and the EU, he will be visiting Prime Minister Giorgia Maloney tomorrow in Rome. So she's got a full day of, the two most important people in the United States.
Certainly. Well, Jennifer Ewing, who is a spokeswoman for Republicans overseas and arguably one of the greatest American exports to the UK, thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a lovely evening, whatever you're up to, Jennifer. That's Jennifer Ewing there. Thank you to her. We'll get more of your thoughts on all of this. Let me know them. 0344 499 1000. Loads of people reacting to Peter Bleksley's story as well, about the fact that there are counter-terrorism officers who are going on an Easter egg hunt. Really, shouldn't they be searching and tracking down terrorists? I would say that would be their number one priority. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
This is a great victory for common sense. And after so many horrible news stories coming out of the UK for so long, and so many different areas, whether it's our economy, whether it's the fraying social fabric, or the hatred of our culture by the elites, or you name it, you got it. This is a remarkable good news story. And yet, of course, it therefore highlights just how far we've fallen.
Yep.
We have this Supreme Court, which people will remember was a kind of weird, pointless Tony Blair vanity project.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just to let you know, this is day 1 of 5 for me, so I'm back tomorrow with Drive between 4 and 7. Then the 2 weekend shows, Saturday and Sunday, between 10 and 1. I hope you can join me for those, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Also, you can tune in on Monday, because I'm filling in for Julia Hartley-Brewer between 10 and 1. So between 4 and 7 tomorrow, and then 10 and 1 on Saturday, Sunday, and indeed Monday. Well, Donald Trump is in the White House, in the Oval Office right at the moment with Giorgia Maloney. We're going to cross to there and see what the President of the United States and indeed the Prime Minister of Italy are saying to one another. Let's go live to the White House now.
Western nation, I don't know if it is the right word, but I know that when I speak about West, mainly I don't speak about a geographical space. I speak about a civilization. And I want to make that civilization stronger. So I think even if we have some problems, okay, between the two shores of the Atlantic, it is the time that we try to sit down and find solutions. So I want to thank President Trump for having accepted an invitation to pay an official visit to Rome in the near future, and consider the possibility in that occasion to meet also with Europe. The goal for me is to make the West great again. Okay, and I think we can do it together. We can. We will keep on work on that. I'm going to close. I want to say only, I'm proud of sitting here as Prime Minister of an Italy that today has a very good situation despite the difficulties. A stable country, reliable country, 1 million more jobs in the last 2 years and a half.
Great.
Inflation is going down, so you forgive me if I promote a bit my country, but you're a businessman and you understand me. So migration flows going down 60%. So we are trying to do our best, but I think we can do it even better together. Also on Ukraine, I will close. Together we've been defending the freedom of Ukraine. Together we can build a just and lasting peace. We support your efforts, Donald.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we're doing well in that effort, but we want to get it done, and we'll see if we can. We want to save. On average, think of it, every week 2,500 people are being killed, mostly soldiers, Russian, Ukrainian soldiers. And if we can save those lives, that would be a very good thing. And so we'll see what we can do. And I think we're getting close, but we'll let you know very soon. And you've been very helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. President, how much longer does Vladimir Putin have to respond to your ceasefire proposal before you put secondary tariffs or sanctions on Russia?
We'll see what that will be. We're going to be hearing from them this week, very shortly actually, and we'll see. But we want it to stop. We want the death and the killing to stop.
Mr. President, on Jerome Powell, you said that the termination of Jerome Powell cannot come fast enough. He says he won't leave, even if you ask him to.
Oh, he'll leave. If I ask him to, he'll be out of there. But
do you believe
I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me.
So
yeah, Go ahead, please. Question.
Are you trying to remove him, Mr. President?
Yeah, question.
Mr. President, yesterday Judge Boasberg, in a case against your administration, said the Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of judicial orders. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, you're going to have to speak to the lawyers. We have great lawyers. I can tell you this, we're doing a fantastic job of getting criminals out of this country who Biden allowed into the country. Hundreds of thousands of criminals, murderers and drug dealers. And I was elected because of the fact, I would say maybe that was the number one fact for a lot of reasons, the economy, a lot of things. But one of the primary reasons I was elected is because I said, I'm going to get the criminals that he allowed to come into our country so stupidly through open borders. I'm going to get them out. And I got a lot of votes, record-setting numbers of votes, as you know. We won everything. The popular vote, all 7 swing states, we won everything. And that's what the public wanted, and that's what I'm doing. But you have to speak to the lawyers because it's up to them.
Mr. President, what do you think of the proposal from France?
Say it.
What do you think of the proposal from France and UK of a peace mission in Ukraine with soldiers? And do you think that Italy should take part into it?
Well, I think Italy will have to make that determination, but peace missions are always good with me. I'm okay with peace missions. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, have you discussed what areas of cooperation have you discussed with the Prime Minister vis-a-vis Italy and the United States and Europe and the United States? And on China?
We discussed it very briefly. No, we're doing very well with negotiations, I think, with all countries. And Scott could tell you a little bit, but we are doing very well. We have a lot of countries that want to make a deal. Frankly, they want to make deals more than I do. Go ahead, Scott. Would you say something, please?
Yeah, we've got a process in place. We're working on the big 15 economies first. We had a fantastic meeting with Japan yesterday. I believe there's been calls with the EU already. And then we have South Korea coming in next week. And I believe India is also talking. That's moving very quickly.
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
Ukraine's President Zelensky has said he has evidence that China is supplying weaponry or ammunition to Russia. Do you have any evidence along those lines? And also, he said we could see a minerals deal signed this week. Is that?
Well, we have a minerals deal, which I guess is going to be signed on Thursday, Scott, next Thursday, soon. And I assume they're going to live up to the deal, so we'll see. But we have a deal on that. No, I have no comment on that. I have no idea. That's his statement, not mine.
Mr. President, there were reports that you waved off an Israeli attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. Can you comment on that? Is that accurate?
And they say the attack is what?
That you waved off an Israeli plan to attack Iranian nuclear facilities.
I wouldn't say waved off. I'm not in a rush to do it because I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death. And I'd like to see that. That's my first option. If there's a second option, I think it would be very bad for Iran. And I think Iran is wanting to talk. I hope they're wanting to talk. It's going to be very good for them if they do. And I'd like to see Iran thrive in the future, do fantastically well. I know the Iranian people, they're incredible people. Always have been very smart, very energetic, very successful people. And I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt anybody. I really don't. But Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's, pretty simple. It's really simple. We're not looking to take their industry. We're not looking to take their land. All we're saying is you can't have a nuclear weapon. The deal that was made with Obama, that deal would have expired already. It was a terrible deal. It would have expired. And that gave them a clear path to a nuclear weapon. I wouldn't have accepted. That's why I terminated the deal. Number one, it was way too short. When countries are involved, you don't make short-term deals. These are countries with long lives. And I terminated that. And it was a great termination because it didn't allow us to do anything. Once it terminated, you know what the deal was. It was a terrible deal. Really, one of many terrible deals made by the U.S. But no, I'd like to see Iran thrive. And they can do that, I think, very easily, or they can do it the other way, and the other way is not going to be good for them. It's going to be really bad for them.
ago, going to China and met with trade officials there.
Well, Jensen's an amazing guy. He's become a friend of mine, and I don't know, he's a person that's very proud of our country. He loves our country. I'm not worried about Jensen at all.
Mr. President, before hold you in contempt, will you take steps to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States and put him in front of a judge?
Well, I'm not involved in it. I'm going to respond by saying you'll have to speak to the lawyers, the DOJ. I've heard many things about him, and we'll have to find out what the truth is. But I will say this, you know, we were inundated by millions of people, many millions of people during the Biden administration. They say 21 million. And a big percentage of those are criminals, serious criminals. I'm not saying just criminals because they came into the border illegally. I'm saying they're criminals at the highest level, murderers. Many of those people murdered more than one person, and they're on the loose. And I was elected to get rid of those criminals, to get them out of our country, or to put them away, but to get them out of our country. And I don't see how judges can take that authority away from a president. We've done an amazing job, Tom Holman, Kristi Noem. We have done an amazing job. Nobody can believe the job we've done. Far greater than what I said. I mean, I got elected on that, but we've done much better. We have right now 99% border. It's a 99%. Nobody thought that would even be, nobody's coming through our border practically. 2 weeks ago, we had 9 people come through, all for medical reasons. We allowed them. We brought them through because one had a heart attack, one had something else, all for medical reasons. We have a great border. We had a great border 4 years ago, but we have a border now that's even tighter, and we did that in a matter of weeks. And no, we have to. We need to get murderers and drug dealers and people that were in jail for horrible. You know, they released jails, Georgia, from all over the world, and released them, not just South America, all over the world, the Congo and Africa. Many, many people come from the Congo. I don't know what that is, but they came from the Congo. And all over the world they came in, opened their jails. Venezuela, practically all of their prisoners released into our country. And we took them because we
That is the President of the United States, Donald Trump. He is in the Oval Office with Giorgia Maloney. She is the Italian Prime Minister. She's making a visit there. And we know that J.D. Vance, the Vice President, is heading over to Italy as very soon, actually, tomorrow. But President Trump will be going to Italy very, very soon. Thank you to Keith. He says, great honour to see Maloney visiting the White House. I'm sure Ursula von der Leyen will be delighted. Wouldn't be surprised if she has Maloney arrested for talking to the enemy. Keith, I'm very disappointed in your message, and all I would say is, can you please give her her full title, which is Chesney Hawkes lookalike Ursula von der Leyen, or Lion, however you want to pronounce it. Although, of course, if you're on the BBC, it is the most affected way of pronouncing. Do you ever notice this? Kevin O'Sullivan's in the studio with me at the BBC. They can't just say Ursula von der Leyen, they say Ursula von der Leyen.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they make it as dramatic as possible.
This dates back to Angela Rippon, because they got a pronunciation department, or is it pronunciation? Seriously,
they'll tell us.
But they do, and the newsreaders take it very seriously. And you're probably too young to remember, but when Angela Rippon was a newsreader at the Beeb, she hilariously, the whole nation used to love it. So lots of problems with guerrillas. So instead of just saying, well, there's some real problems with the Colombian guerrillas, she would look at, there's been a problem with the Colombian guerrillas.
But I mean, we don't call it Paris or Roma. We call it Paris and Rome. There is an English way of
yeah, you know that thing where they have Beijing and Kolkata and all that. What I don't understand about that is why we only do it for some cities. Yeah, but loads we don't bother with.
Turkey and Kiev is the most recent one. Right, Kev, what's coming up on your programme?
Obviously, we're going to look more at the fallout from the trans women's situation.